Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 871 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again. And we're hearing that Ukraine is preparing for a new Russian attack, and also Belarus has withdrawn from the Ukrainian border. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine and news from around the world, as we've been able to get major news over the past 24 hours that President Lukashenko of Belarus has announced that Belarusian forces are conducting a complete withdrawal from the northern area of the Ukrainian border, meaning that hostilities and escalations in between Ukraine and Belarus have now effectively ceased as of today. A major bombshell in the development of this war and a major disappointment and betrayal of Belarus's support of Russia's invasion in Ukraine. At the exact same time, we've been able to get amazing breaking news out of the area of the Don River, as we got to see that a Ukrainian drone slammed down into a Russian oil facility near to the city of Volgodonsk and ended up wiping out the last usable fuel node along the entire length of the Don River. Simultaneously, we were also able to get news from Krasnodar that a fire was breaking out because of partisan attacks, and even deep inside of Russia on the eastern side of the Ural Mountains, partisan attacks are continuing to sever and disrupt Russian logistical efforts in support of the war effort. We have also been able to get additional news from inside of Poland that they are continuing to ramp up their military growth, and they are beginning to militarize at speeds never before seen in this modern day and age in Europe. At the exact same time, we were also able to get news that the Taiwanese have observed that the People's Liberation Army Rocket Force is conducting missile drills near to the area of Mongolia. These are believed to be in preparation for an air campaign against the Republic of China, also known as Taiwan. And we were also able to get major news out of the United States that today the U.S. is developing an extended range missile for Ukraine exclusively for their use. And of course, just hours before the stream, we were also able to get somewhat concerning news that we will not be addressing in large form tonight on this stream out of Butler, Pennsylvania, but we will be making a very short statement about the incident that happened today, of course maintaining our non-political standing here on this channel, but making comment about something that certainly will become a part of American history that happened just mere hours before the stream went live. As many of y'all will know, a presidential candidate that was running a political campaign or a political rally just north of Pittsburgh in Butler, Pennsylvania, was the target of a political assassination attempt today, with a gunman taking several shots at the candidate for president and one shot grazing the president's head on the very side and damaging the ear. We also understand that there is one person in the crowd who has been killed because of the gunman, and an additional two have been injured. This is a very unfortunate day for democracy. Of course, seeing an assassination attempt happening against any presidential candidate is not only an affront to the political party that candidate is a member of, but is an affront to the entirety of the United States, as it attempts to subvert the political process and the wishes of the people of this grand republic by hoping to remove a political candidate from the running through extremely criminal and clandestine means. Of course, we cannot speak to a political end about our affiliations or whether we support or condemn any candidates in the current presidential election, but one thing that we will say is that these kinds of attacks are extremely abhorrent and an affront not only to the United States of America, but also to the world at large, once again showing that democracy is under its greatest perils in the modern day, not only from enemies from the outside, but those that believe that their friends and neighbors and common citizenry here in the United States may be their own enemies as well. It is an incredibly unfortunate thing to see. Of course, we will not be covering this in any large form on stream tonight, but we did want to make sure to make a comment about this because it is one of the most serious political assassination attempts that we have seen over the past several decades. And something like this should never be supported, and it should never be a point of revel here in the United States or in any democratic or self-determining nation around the world, as it is nothing more than an underhanded and thug-like attempt at trying to strong-arm a democratic society into having a candidate that they may or may not want by physically and violently removing them from the process. But nevertheless, we will be moving on into the rest of the news tonight. But before we do, I do have to make a quick comment that considering the extremely concerning news that has just come out very recently, here in the United States. I once again have to remind everyone that we do have a no politics rule in this channel. I will say this: we completely condemn any kinds of violent action, violent criminal action that is taken against any of the current presidential candidates that are running. We will not support statements that are in support of the gunman. The gunman is, by the way, in case you all are wondering, he is apparently dead and has been shot and killed by law enforcement, but we will not be tolerating any comments whatsoever of a political vein on this channel, and we will also not be supporting any kinds of words of violence and also statements in where people would wish that the gunman had succeeded in assassinating a presidential candidate. That form of violence will never be accepted here on this channel, and it will never be accepted as a core tenet of the Lee Spring Army. But moving on
Also, isn't that what Putin does? And isn't that what Ukraine's fighting against as well? It's like that's what all of our efforts are going into on this channel, is making sure democracy can prevail. And that's what Ukraine's fighting for. This entire several years has been fighting for, is to prevent things like this from happening. And this is what Putin does all the time. He goes around killing people that he doesn't like so that way he can stay in. So definitely not good, and we don't want to support that.
I would have to say we completely do not support that, and I hope that everyone understands and respects that on this channel. We do know that there are some very ravenous, crazy people out there who are extremely radical and wish death upon both candidates in the ongoing presidential election that we're seeing right now in America, but that will never be supported as a position of the Lee Spring Army. One, because we do not take a political stance, and two, we do not support any kind of political violence or any kind of violence of any sort here in the Lee Spring Army at all. And so with that, we are now going to be moving on into the major breaking news, and starting off at Ukraine's northern border, near to the area of Kyiv, just 50 miles away at its farthest, we were able to see that Belarus has officially withdrawn their forces from the border. This was made clear in an official statement by President Lukashenko, or as many people have called him, the dictator of Belarus, which he largely is. Lukashenko today, as he addressed a crowd and said, in an attempt to conduct the de-escalations with Ukraine and to lower hostilities in the entirety of Eastern Europe, Belarusian forces, armed forces that have been built up on the Ukrainian border for quite some time, are conducting a complete withdrawal. And according to information that we've been able to get from the Ukrainian intelligence, that does appear to have been a factual statement, and there is solid proof to show that Belarusian forces are currently conducting a complete withdrawal from the border area, and the hostilities or the rising tensions in between Belarus and Ukraine have now come to a complete cessation.
Наши пограничники и военные перехватывают десятками, можно сказать, разведывательные средства, особенно беспилотники, уже на нашей территории, которые углубляются не на 1 метр на территорию Беларуси. Вы видели в средствах массовой информации, несколько таких беспилотных летательных аппаратов были уничтожены. Но я ценю украинцев за то, что они, сжав зубы, это восприняли нормально. Ну что, уничтожили, значит уничтожили. Но меня напрягает другой фактор. Вы тоже это все видели, что эти беспилотники перебрасывают уже центнеры, не килограммы, самые современные взрывчатки.
I'm going to be ending the clip right here. I just wanted to show y'all a little bit of the statement that he made. But to make this quite clear, we do not have subtitles, so I can really only go off of our translated transcript that we had to summarize what he said. But he did say in this address right here in this video that Belarusian forces are going to be conducting a complete withdrawal from the Ukrainian border, and we already have evidence to show that that withdrawal has begun as of right now. That is incredible news, and once again showing us that there has been a major shift within the area of Eastern Europe, and it seems as though the Belarusians have conducted one of the largest diplomatic betrayals of the Russian Federation within their own sphere of influence seen since the beginning of the war. The Belarusians have largely been in support of Russia's efforts inside of Ukraine and have continued to conduct escalatory and provocative actions against their NATO neighbors in the Baltic states and Poland. And now we are seeing that they are starting to take a much colder stance to this entire war, and they're beginning to cease any kind of escalatory attempts. This is a very interesting move. And this is one that I would have to say is a major betrayal to Putin. And let me explain why. These Belarusian forces were never directly involved in the war or an actual armed confrontation with Ukraine. But they did tie up a large amount of Ukrainian forces in the northern border area because it was always feared that if the Ukrainians moved a lot of their resources and manpower from the northern border region, Belarus was just going to step right back over, and then Ukraine would have to rush those forces back to the northern regions to try and protect against a Belarusian second front that would have opened, once again attempting to spearhead towards Kyiv or completely cut off Ukraine from further Western support within the area of Western Ukraine. The fact that that is changing now, and that Ukraine will be able to move most of the forces that they currently have in northern Ukraine down into the front lines in the southeast, shows that this is a huge betrayal, and this is jeopardizing the entire Russian position in the war right now. This is something that we believe is going to be a pretty major occurrence, especially for Ukraine and their defensive position, as they now have a lot more free wiggle room to move their troops around and figure out what would be the best approach in trying to deal with the Russian Federation that is still conducting a full-scale war within the southeastern region of the country. And a lot of people have been talking about this development with Belarus, but at the same time that Belarus is starting to appear to make the escalatory actions against Ukraine, we are seeing that Poland is apparently not biting and believes that the Russian sphere, including Belarus, is still largely a hostile force and one that will be a great threat to Poland's security and Poland's future in the years to come. And we have heard that Poland is ramping up their military spending once again. They are now going to be increasing their military spending in just the next year, 6 months away from 4.2% of their GDP, one of the highest spending budget percentages per capita in the entirety of NATO. It is now going to be bumped up to a whopping 5% of the Polish GDP by next year. Poland is in the process of building, and has already built, the largest ground army in Europe so far. And now this massive ramping up of the military spending to 5% of the GDP next year, the Polish will have the strongest and probably most well-funded armed force within the entirety of NATO. This is something outside the United States, of course, but this is going to be something that is wildly interesting to see and wildly shocking. And once again, showing that while the Belarusians may be conducting a short-term de-escalatory action right now with Ukraine, the Polish are still preparing for the Russians and the Belarusians to be a major threat to NATO and Polish security going on into the future. The main Polish concern, if a war was to ever break out, would be to fortify the Suwalki Gap, stop any Russian offensives from moving outside of Kaliningrad and into Poland, and also any potential Belarusian offensives from advancing towards Warsaw, which is actually not that far away from the Belarusian border, and at its farthest, it is, well, at its closest, it is only about 80 miles away, meaning that it is wildly close to the border, only 30 miles further away from the Belarusian border than the capital of Ukraine, Kyiv, is, and of course that was a major issue at the very beginning of the war. But a lot of people have been talking about this because the Polish are showing that they still don't really trust the Russian Federation and the Belarusians in the future to be able to keep the peace and stability in Europe, and they believe that they still will be a very major threat and a very major concern going on into the future. And so it seems as though there's been a little bit of a mixed response to the Belarusians and the Russians today. A lot of people are saying that this action by Lukashenko is actually a betrayal of Putin, and it shows that he just doesn't have either the military backing inside of Belarus or the personal conviction of his own to be able to continue forward with supporting a Russian plan in full inside of Ukraine. Others are saying that this is only a ruse, and Putin has a new plan for Belarus that is going to be coming around in the future. And that may involve Belarus's military or armed forces being used in a completely different means, in a completely different area doing something else. A lot of people have had a load of things to say about what has happened today with Belarus, because it is such a massive and shocking development. It is just something we've never seen before, and it is a complete contradiction to what Putin and the Russian government would really need to be able to try and at least eke out minor successes at heavy losses in southeastern Ukraine. And Matthew, what are people thinking about this shocking upset and this weird move by Belarus? Do they think it's a betrayal of Putin, or do you think, or do they think that it is a new plan that Russia has for Belarus? And what are you thinking about it as well?
So it looks like 41% of the audience said Putin has a quote-unquote new plan for Belarus, and that's the reason why the troops have been withdrawn, while 40% said Belarus might be defying Putin, and only 7% said it's meaningless because Putin doesn't care what Belarus does. And I would definitely have to disagree with that last option there. Putin definitely cares what Belarus does, because Belarus is basically a proxy state of Russia. That's been known for quite some time. I personally would doubt anything that Belarus says. If they say they're withdrawing troops, I would wait for picture evidence to see that actually happening instead of relying on what Belarus is saying, because they've been very unreliable, and anyone attached with Putin, you should never trust them because they're always spewing lies, and it's probably no different this time. So I'm with the 41%. I think Putin has a new plan for them, and whatever it is, it's probably nefarious, and I wouldn't count this as a good moment until it's almost certain that it is what it appears to be. And right now, there's really not enough evidence for that, in my opinion. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I do believe that this may be a betrayal by Belarus against the Russian Federation. And let me lay out why, because this actually has to do a lot with the big picture and the long-term timeline of what Belarus has done in this war. Since day one, we always thought that the Belarusians would get involved directly in the war and support the Russian Federation and a united front against Ukraine in this conflict. And yet we never saw that actually happen. We thought the reason why it didn't happen is because Lukashenko could not get the backing of the military, and that the Belarusian military was threatening to conduct a coup d'etat if Lukashenko ordered them to move into Ukraine and conduct offensive actions against the Ukrainians. And for that reason, we largely believe, although we don't know for certain, the Belarusians never directly entered the war. And so it shows, at least in that one instance from what we understand, that the Belarusian military has a lot of say and really is the one kind of calling the shots on what the Republic of Belarus has been doing so far in this war, at least off of that initial confrontation that they had with Lukashenko in the very first month of the war. And as the war has gone by, we have seen that Belarus has never gotten directly involved. We have seen a limited example for a very short period of time where it appeared that the Belarusians were providing Russia with military equipment such as tanks and APCs, which, while it's support for Russia, it also shows that Belarus is depleting their armed forces at the moment to try and support the Russians, meaning that if the Belarusians ever did enter a conflict, they would be significantly weakened because now they don't have a large amount of equipment. Then, in the present day, we're seeing that the Belarusians are now withdrawing the military from the Ukrainian border, which may be, once again, another confrontation in between the military of Belarus and Lukashenko, where the military said, we are getting in a precarious situation, we don't care if this is within Putin's bigger interests or any diplomatic ambitions, we don't want to do this. Order us off the border. And then Lukashenko's hands were tied again, and then he had to order them back off of the border. It just seems to me, given what we understand about the Belarusian government and how fragile it is, and how fragile Lukashenko's reign really is within the country, that it's highly likely that this actually may be a betrayal of Putin, because Lukashenko really has no other choice. Lukashenko would like to continue to further Putin's goals and aims of a Russian world in Eastern Europe, but the backing for that in Belarus, especially within the armed forces, may not be there, and that's why he's continuing to have to do things that appear to be open betrayals to Putin, is because otherwise he won't even be in charge of Belarus there in the near future. And so going off of that, I believe that this may actually be a real betrayal of Putin by Belarus or by Lukashenko, but really because there's no other choice rather than to betray him, or otherwise Belarus may not exist the way it does right now, meaning they might have a brand new leader. And so with that, I hope that does address the Belarusian situation fairly well. And with that, we're now going to be moving on into the Russian Federation. And we have a wild amount of news, and probably one of the most shocking bits of news that we were able to get was out of the Don River area. Many of y'all have known that the Don River has been a bit of a target for Ukraine recently. We have seen that the Ukrainians have used drones to strike the refueling node right here within the port of Azov, which fuels the entire city of Rostov-on-Don's maritime fleet. We have also seen that the Ukrainians struck an oil facility at Kalach-na-Donu. We can actually see that oil facility right here. We can also see it just a little bit further up in these silos as well. Those were stricken and completely destroyed by Ukrainian drone attacks. The interesting thing about the Don River is that they only have 3 refueling nodes along the entire length of the river. They have one in Kalach-na-Donu, they have one in Azov, and then finally they have one in Volgodonsk. Technically, it's actually in the smaller town just north called Semilyansk, but nevertheless, it serves as a fueling node for the port of Volgodonsk, which we can see right down here along the Don River Reservoir. This little oil facility is right here. And this oil facility, once again, like the rest along the river, serve a pure purpose of fueling and keeping the Russian vessels traveling up and down the Don River from the Volga and into the Black Sea and the rest of the open seas operational and running, keeping them fueled and making sure that any kind of shipborne transit can continue up and down the Don River. This facility, the last of its kind along the entire length of the Don River, was destroyed today in a decisive Ukrainian drone attack. And we were actually able to get, in a very rare instance, actual footage showing the drones impacting and exploding onto the facility in real time on the security camera footage from the oil facility. Here is the clip, and we can see in this first one of these security guards with an anti-drone gun walking around near one of the silos. Well, you see that apparently the drone's on its way. He's fumbling the anti-drone gun and trying to get it ready to use. He finally starts aiming it at the drone right here, and we can see the drone is apparently flown on by, and it hit a silo. And off he goes, off he goes, and the fire begins to immediately rage on the silo that was hit. And this is another clip from another area of the facility when that same drone came in. We can actually see it this time on camera, but we can see him talking on the phone. We can see the anti-drone gun right there in his hand. We can see him looking around. Now he's frantically trying to put down the phone and get in a line of sight at the drone. We now see him aiming the anti-drone gun at the drone. There it is, right there. You can actually see it. It flies right over, begins to go in a dive, and boom, it hits the silo dead on, starting the fire that ends up burning down most of the facility.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, those drones that are flying in right there, that's not the drones that the drone gun is intended to take down, is it?
Absolutely not. These drone guns are meant to take down things like DJI Mavics, not larger, long-range kamikaze drones like that. So these were pretty much useless and pretty much just a last-ditch attempt to try and stop the hit from actually occurring. But then,
it's like, Tony, you're shooting like a, what is it, like a radio interference gun at like basically a small Cessna. It's like, that's really not going to do anything to it.
Yeah, it's like, that's not doing that much. But then all hell broke loose, Matthew, as that oil refinery caught on fire, and like every other, it burned. It just never stopped burning. They could not put the fire out. And moving
that
on,
music really sets the mood perfectly for that.
But anyways, here's the next clip, up close. Oh, and it was toasting.
Filling the sky with some of that lovely, good toxic smoke for the lungs. It's got to be good for you.
Oh yeah, we can see additional hits. Apparently there's other damage to other silos nearby.
I guess they're listening to memes and stuff while they're filming this fire and this tragedy.
Dude, you gotta get your daily dose of memes. And moving on from that, we got another clip. This one actually showing another impact of another Ukrainian drone. At this point, apparently the oil workers had given up at stopping the drones, because this one just flew on in afterwards and hit the same silo. There it is again. Ooh! And that's the end of that clip right there. But moving on from that and into our last segment of refinery fire videos or oil facility fires that we actually got to see, this is a duplicate of the first clip. This is a new one, once again showing the pillar of smoke rising up into the air near Vovchansk. And also that truck passing by that said, "Smart!" And then it had a NATO symbol on it, dude. Look at that.
All right.
Dude,
it's
no
true.
way.
It's smart NATO driving right past the disaster.
Dude, that's NATO just throwing in some commentary like a ice skating judge threw up the car and said, "Smart!" It's like, good. It's like, I like that. And then we can see the cameraman starts trying to follow the truck a little bit like, wait a minute, did that say smart with a NATO sign on it? But anyways, that's the end of that clip, and moving on into our last one, we then got to see the start of the fire here. But still, once again showing that the entire, and this is actually the first time that we can say this, the entire Don River route, which is a major supply route for the Russian Federation and a major economic corridor, is completely out of any kind of usable fuel. There is absolutely no fuel nodes all the way from Rostov-on-Don, all the way from Azov, actually, in the Don River, at the very mouth of the Don River, all the way up to Volgograd itself. Now, I do believe that there's a fueling node in Volgograd, and let me make sure to double-check that, because if there is one, we will find it. That is more of like a ferry access, so let's keep going. There's no fuel node there. Dang, dude, Volgograd's kind of like a hellhole. I'm not gonna lie. Do they have like any actual built-up infrastructure along this river rather than like concrete pads? So where does this go? So this is a gangway actually down to once again another ferry. I'm not seeing any refueling nodes at all in the city, like none. So there may not even be any refueling nodes here in Volgograd. Let's go over here and take a look really quickly. Once again, no refueling nodes. We do not see any fuel silos either. Not seeing any along that length of the river. So let's go a little bit further north. We're now getting into the industrial area of Volgograd, near the old tractor factory, which was a site of a major battle in World War II. Once again, no fueling nodes to speak of yet. We're still not seeing a fueling node. Volgograd, and here's the dam that leads to the next part of the Volga River. So there is no fueling node, from what we can tell, in Volgograd, meaning that there is no usable fuel anywhere close to the Don River. The canal that, well, this is why this is important, because the Volga River and the Don River are actually connected by this little canal network that is built in right here at the southern end of the city. You could see the canal right here, and it travels all the way from this area of southeastern Volgograd and all the way to the actual Don River right here. And then it feeds out right there into the rest of the Don River, and that means that the entire Russian economy, all of Russia's industry that is near the Volga River, which is a large amount of it, has direct sea access, actually. You can load something up onto a ship in, say, Kazan or Nizhny Novgorod, and that little ship could set off traveling all the way down the Volga River, all the way to Volgograd, then through the Don River, and then out into the Black Sea, into the Mediterranean, and anywhere else in the world. And that cargo and that equipment can travel anywhere. And the same thing can travel into Russia and pretty much anywhere to any major city inside of the Russian Federation. This supply corridor on the Don River is extremely important for the Russian economy, and the fact that it's been pretty much knocked out for any usable fuel source means that it's going to be a lot more difficult for Russia to transport cargo in and out of Russia and to and from the Volga River. And not only that, it's going to be a lot more difficult for them to transport bulk resources to keep the Russian armed forces running. They are most likely going to have to move entirely to trains and trucks. Trains are fairly inexpensive, but if they have to start supplementing the train routes with trucks, that's when it's going to start getting very expensive for the Russians to maintain those sorts of routes. Or they may have to airlift the cargo in, especially if it gets into a very desperate situation, which is going to be prohibitively expensive. This damage is severe, and I cannot put that out enough. This is one of the most devastating attacks or attack campaigns that we've seen by Ukrainian drones inside of the Russian Federation due to the kind of consequences that it will create. But moving on from that and down into Krasnodar, we also got to see that a fire broke out in Krasnodar today. Now, this fire appeared to have burned quite nicely. When you see it right over there. Kuban 23.
And what is this on fire again?
I don't really know for certain. They said it's unclear which building is burning, so we actually do not know what's on fire in Krasnodar. We just know that it's on fire. And also,
man, the fires are getting so widespread and like random, they don't even know what's on fire anymore. It's just the whole of Russia's on fire at this point.
Dude, they said, "What's on fire?" And we went, "Oh," like we were like, "I don't know, man." Like, hell, it's your guess. Meanwhile, near the Kerch Bridge, we also got to see that the Russians are starting to bring in World War II artillery. These are M46 artillery pieces, and let me go and type these in, and let me go show you this really quickly. This is an M46, right there. These things,
I like the white walls. That's quite classy looking.
Man, they styling on them hoes. Like they sit there and went, I mean, hell, look at that. I mean, they're really styling on them. You know what I mean? Look at that.
Indeed.
They really are styling on them. I mean, look at that. They are styling on them. But nevertheless, getting past the whole styling on them thing, these guns are incredibly old. These were first introduced in service in 1951, meaning that they were around during the time of Stalin, and the Russians have gotten so desperate, they are actually starting to load these onto trains and transport them into Ukraine to try and get any form of usable artillery.
Это на войну справляются. Стоят уже, скоро их подкрепят. Поедут.
This guy is
Там
whispering.
целый ряд. Вот уже тут стоял один ряд, их отвезли.
Listen, Jack, this equipment's so old, it's old as Methuselah.
listen, Jack. Back in the day, me and Stalin, we smoked Adobe. But anyways, moving on from that, and into our next bit of news outside of that area, we also got to see that partisan attacks were even going all the way out to Yekaterinburg, as we got to see that a railway signal box, or the actual railroad itself, got blown up. The clip was so short, I really couldn't tell whether it was a signal box or the actual rails themselves, but the partisans are still out there, and they're still working incredibly hard, even close to the city of Yekaterinburg. But with that, we have seen that the Russians are not doing that well today, and of course the West is continuing to build up efforts in response to the Russian Federation. And we've also been able to hear that the United States is planning on developing an extended range missile that will be cheap, have a very long range of 460 kilometers, and will be air-launched missile, meaning that it probably will be used on an Su-24, an F-16, or something along those lines. But still, very interesting to see that the United States is planning on developing a low-cost missile specifically for Ukrainian use. At the
Also, did I see that correctly? That I think it was like in the replies to that tweet. It said that the development would take 2 years or something like that. Did I see that correctly?
Let me just go make sure.
Let's see. Says no later than 2 years. Apparently, the U.S. is expecting this war to go on for ages. Apparently, if it's going to be a 2-year development phase.
Oh, excuse me, everyone. I forgot to say that. Yeah, it won't be ready for about 2 years. Whoopsies. I read to it, but anyways, moving on from that, you're right, Matthew. They have to be expecting that this war will be going on for some time. But moving on from that, and really quickly taking us all the way around the world, I thought I would make sure to keep you all up to date on a little bit of what's going on in between China and Taiwan, as the Taiwanese government today made a very specific mention about something that's going on inside of China. This is according to the Ministry of National Defense for the Republic of China. Right there, you can see ROC, Republic of China. But they said PLA rocket force were detected to conduct multiple waves of test firing operations in Mongolia from 0400 hours today. The ROC armed forces have monitored the situation and maintain alertness. The reason why these are being monitored so greatly, although these tests are pretty much all the way up in Mongolia, is because they are assuming that the People's Liberation Army rocket forces are conducting these launches and these drills in an attempt to try and simulate an attack on Taiwan, the estimated ranges that would be involved, and the kind of possibilities and the kind of issues that they would have to iron out in an actual attack. So that's what the Republic of China, Taiwan, is currently believing at the moment about what the Chinese are doing in Mongolia, and we are going to be waiting to see if that actually is true. But it does seem as though Taiwan is taking great concern to these People Liberation Army rocket force tests that are being conducted and launched in the area of Mongolia today, and are taking close note of them, and once again making sure to keep very, very close tabs on what the Chinese are doing in relations to Taiwan. But moving on from that little bit of news, it's now time for us to move on into something else, and something that is brand new. And this is something that kind of ties into the whole Belarusian border thing. Because as the Belarusians are saying that they are withdrawing from the border area, we are then hearing that Ukrainian's intelligence chief, Budanov, warns of a brand new potential Russian attack from the north. And some people are wondering, is Russia really even capable of something like that anymore? And also, is this something that he's just saying? But a lot of people have been throwing in their comments on this, and a lot of people have been saying that Russia will try, but they'll fail, and some people are saying that Russia isn't equipped to do so, and some people are saying that Russia has even been able to find new equipment somehow, and they will be able to do this. But a lot of people are saying all kinds of different things about what Budanov said today. And Matthew, what are people saying about that, and what are you thinking about it?
All right, so now that we've heard the intel chief in Ukraine, Budanov, warn us all that a new potential Russian attack might be coming from the north in the near future, the big question is Russia capable? 46% said Russia will certainly try to attack, but will certainly fail, while 27% said yes, Russia has amassed new equipment over the very short break they've had from Kharkiv, and 16% said no, Russia simply isn't equipped to pull off a new attack. And I would tend to lean toward Budanov's direction, because obviously he does have intel that we're not privy to, presumably so. So I would tend to believe that he knows what he's talking about. So on this one, I'm going to say that Russia would probably try to do so, but certainly fail. But one point that might be a good point of discussion is that now that Belarus has pulled their troops away from the border and withdrawn completely, we're now hearing of a potential Russian attack from the north, which is also kind of where Belarus is at. So we're not hearing any direct statements that maybe Russia might use Belarus to attack inside of Ukraine again. We're not hearing that, but that is a possibility, considering this attack might be coming from somewhere up north of Ukraine. So we're not hearing the exact specifics, and also Budanov didn't say exactly which axis it would be that the attack would come from, but it is possible. So in the end, I'm with the 46%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that, in my opinion, I would have to go with actually the 17% that say Russia isn't equipped to do so. I highly doubt that there will be an offensive being conducted from the northern region, considering that Lukashenko today said that they're attempting to de-escalate and lower hostilities in between Belarus and Ukraine. While they may not be that trustworthy, it would make no sense then for Russian forces to replace their positions and then launch an offensive. Not only that, Russia is running out of equipment. Just like I was showing down near the area of the Kerch Strait, they are bringing in World War II era artillery at this point to try and support their armed forces because they are running so thin on most different equipment categories that there isn't really a lot more left. So when the world would this new offensive group be composed of inside of Belarus that would then conduct this offensive? I just wouldn't know. I mean, there's really hardly anything left. And another thing that I would have to say about that is I generally have a reason to not believe everything that Budanov says. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, well, why not? You know, he's the intelligence chief. Budanov has said a lot of things over the course of the war. To be quite honest, he says just about everything, and it's almost a near hit and a miss every single time he says something. Like, for example, this isn't the first time that he said that the northern border was going to be invaded again. He started saying that for the first time, I think it was about 3 or 4 months after the Russian invasion near Kyiv had failed and all Russian forces had withdrawn. I believe even by 4 months he was starting to say, oh, they're building up, they're going to attack again. And then after the Russians completely left Belarus, he said, oh, the Belarusians are moving down, they're going to start attacking, and it's never really happened. And then also the big, of course, many people will know this because this is the ongoing running theme on this channel as far as what I believe with Budanov. Budanov told me that those reactors right there on satellite picture would all blow up in the next day and everyone in the West would be irradiated. And it never happened. And that was one of the biggest marks against Budanov's credibility, to me personally, that I've ever gotten. So generally, whenever I get information from Budanov, I usually distrust it. I know a lot of people are like, well, you know, he was only wrong that one time. But that is a pretty severe way to be wrong, because he actually had me, to be quite honest, seriously concerned that we were going to be dealing with a massive radioactive fallout issue inside of Europe, and not only that, inside of America. And the fact that I was that concerned about it and actually believed that hook, line, and sinker and reported that on this channel, and then it never ended up being true even a year and a half later, I am generally one to not believe everything that Budanov says. Maybe something would happen in the north. Go ahead.
So overall, what would you say would be Budanov's motivation for coming out to say this? I mean, I guess I could see an argument to be made that maybe he's coming out to say this to get more funding for Ukraine, to help Zelensky out with more talking points, to say, hey, look, there's more attacks coming soon, so we need more aid and more funding, etc. But what do you think?
I don't know why he would say it, because, you know, he said all kinds of things in the past. You know, like he said, oh, you know, like the Russians are going to launch a naval invasion on Odessa. You know, he has said things that have never ended up happening. Like, for example, he said at another point, I don't know if many people remember this, but there's a nuclear reactor, I believe, it's north of Vovchansk. Let me look around for it really quickly. Is it somewhere around here? Is it Avdiivka? No, I think it's further north than that. Here we go. The South Ukraine nuclear power plants. It's north of Vovchansk. It's near Konstantinivka. This Konstantinivka over here. I remember at a time, and correct me if I'm wrong, folks, because maybe my memory of this is getting a little hazy, that he said, oh, you know, after the Russians advanced on Kherson, so this was way early on in the war, he said, oh, actually, the Russians don't plan on taking Mykolaiv. They actually plan on bypassing Mykolaiv and sending a special forces team all the way up to this power plant to go seize it and then try and use it as a hostage situation against Ukraine. And that never even came close to happening from what I remember, because I remember explicitly having to find this thing like years ago and having to look at it and talk about it because they said that the Russians may try and send some special forces team up here to seize the power plant from the Ukrainians and try and end up using it as some sort of nuclear blackmail, if I remember correctly. I might be wrong on that. But he's said a lot of stuff that has ended up not being true from what I can recall and what I know about him. And if you have that much of a chance of hitting and missing with everything you say, I don't really consider the Northern Front to be all that serious. On top of that, well, the Belarusians backing off right now, and from what we understand, there's no proof by Maxar satellite or anything that the Russians are moving armed forces into Belarus at the moment. We would hear about it if they were, I promise y'all. It makes no sense to say, oh, a northern invasion is imminent, because you know what it does? That information gets into Zelensky's command circle, and then it gets into the military's command circle, and then the military goes, well, now we can't move all of these guys who were pretty much doing nothing up in the north away from the Northern Front and back down into the areas of southeastern Ukraine, because Budanov is telling us that an invasion is going to be happening any day now, even if there isn't really a lot to show that that's true. So let's keep them up here and tie up all of this manpower waiting for an invasion that will never come, instead of moving them down into the southeastern area to deal with the Russians down there. It's one thing to have misinformation or false statements come out from an intelligence bureau, but this one in particular has a lot to do with how Ukraine is going to be making its decisions in the future. And it could be detrimental decision making, like, let's not, because we already know that the Ukrainian armed forces is short on manpower. That's a huge complaint that the Ukrainian government has admitted to, and everyone admits to in the Ukrainian armed forces. So with a shortage of manpower, and manpower desperately needing to be located wherever it needs to be at the exact given moment, Budanov is pretty much going to encourage tying up a load of Ukrainian forces onto an inactive border that has no chance of a major offensive starting anytime soon, instead of allowing them to move further south and actually deal with the ongoing war that's happening in southeastern Ukraine. So I would say it's just, I would not believe it. I wouldn't work off of that information. If I was President Zelensky, I would say, maybe so, maybe that is the case, but the Belarusians are withdrawing at this very moment. We can physically see it. And not only that, we don't see any proof of the Russians going into southern Belarus, so let's move everyone down into southeastern Ukraine where they'll be a lot more useful. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, well, that was the thing. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are now moving on into our next bits of news. And we actually have some pretty interesting news from inside of Ukraine itself, as we were able to see that today, Budanov actually did say that there have been plots by the Ukrainian government to take out Putin. Now, I just said that generally I don't trust a lot of what Budanov says. I don't really have a reason to disbelieve these statements. These are fairly founded in what we already know. But Budanov told about attempts to eliminate Putin. And according to Budanov, he said that the Russians are afraid of losing Putin because he is the guarantor of their life stability. And he said that they have that assassination attempts have been made, but as you can see, they have failed so far, according to him. And of course, we have good reason to believe that because Putin's still alive. And then also, the Kremlin then made a comment on Budanov's statement. And this statement was actually by Dmitry Peskov, which many people may know here on this channel. And we got to hear that according to Dmitry Peskov's claims, all threats from the Kiev regime are obvious. Therefore, the security of the first person is ensured at the appropriate level. I like how they call Putin the first person, like it's the first person perspective. Like, I don't know what the hell that means, but still, really interesting here. The Ukrainian government is attempting to whack Putin. It just seems as though they haven't really gotten a good chance yet. And assassinating someone's actually a lot more difficult than you would think, especially for a state actor to conduct. Because unlike deranged lunatics who just take it upon themselves to conduct vigilante justice in their minds, and they end up trying to shoot at someone at, say, like a political rally or something, and then they end up missing every shot pretty much because they are, stupid, and they're also insane. The governments of the world can't really conduct assassinations that straightforward because it would be linked back to them immediately. And if they were trying to just sway events inside of a country, now they've ended up creating a full-on war instead, which is something that everyone generally wants to avoid. That's why the United States, as a good example, tried to kill Fidel Castro, who was the leader of Cuba, about 500 or so times, and every single time it failed. They poisoned a milkshake. He didn't pick it up and drink it. They put a bomb under a very nice-looking conch shell underwater. He ended up just looking at it, and he didn't pick it up off the reef, so the bomb didn't blow up. There's a million different ways that we tried to kill Fidel Castro, but we had to make sure that they were ways that were mysterious enough that they couldn't be tied directly back to the United States when we were doing it. And all of them failed because none of them were just overt enough to actually get the job done. That is kind of the thing that Ukraine and Putin, Ukraine and Russia are doing with each other in their attempts to assassinate Putin and Zelensky. They have to be able to try and take the guy out without it being completely overt. And also on top of that, considering that some laws are much more strict in Russia and Ukraine that make those attempts a lot more difficult. It's just generally harder to pull off on the big picture. But still, interesting to hear that Budanov is trying to take out Putin, and a lot of people are wondering, will Ukraine's attempts ever be successful, and will Putin ever be assassinated? And it seems like a lot of people actually have faith that Putin will end up dead one day. Some people are saying that it's highly unlikely, and then some people are saying that Putin is pretty much immortal and practically untouchable. And so, Matthew, what do we got? What are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so on the question, will Putin ever be eliminated? It looks like 45% said yes, he will eventually, while 35% said maybe, but it's really highly unlikely, and 14% said no, Putin is nearly untouchable. And honestly, on this one, I'm going to have to be in the minority. I'm with the 14%. I think that Putin is nearly untouchable because the way he has barricaded himself in the Kremlin and also surrounded himself by yes men and also people that he highly trusts, it is almost impossible to eliminate Putin while this war is going on. Also, another complication as well is Putin really doesn't go to many places. And there's also speculation that when he finally does go somewhere, he might send a body double instead of sending himself, which is obviously a complication because if you can't get the real guy, then you can't get Putin. So, being with the 14%, I would have to say that Putin probably won't get eliminated anytime soon. That is unfortunate, of course, but I don't think it's going to happen. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that in my personal opinion, I don't think he's going to get killed. I don't think Zelensky is going to get killed either, because these assassination attempts are conducted hundreds and hundreds of times through history, especially during the middle of a war. Like, everyone in World War II was trying to assassinate each other, literally everybody, and none of it ever really succeeded. Hitler ended up, taking himself out. So it's not really like any assassination attempts against him, which were conducted a lot, not just by the Allies, but by the Germans themselves. They just never really worked. And so I would have to say he's probably not going to end up dead one day anytime soon. I have a feeling he'll probably just live on his life how he has been doing, and will probably just die of natural causes, to be entirely honest. And so with that, I hope that...
the most successful or the closest to success that I think Ukraine's ever gotten to actually eliminating Putin was, in that video, do you recall when that one guy tried to pass Putin a stick of gum, like, oh, you want some? He's like, oh, no thanks. That was like speculated, maybe an assassination attempt. Do you recall that video, by the way?
I think so, yeah, but Putin never accepts food. Anything that has to be, like, chewed or put in your mouth, he never accepts.
That's true, and I think that's due to his former KGB training as well. And also, it's just common sense. Like, why are you going to accept food from a random stranger when you're someone who's a high-value target like that? So I just don't think it's going to happen. And also, the fact that Ukraine says they've attempted so many times to do this, and it has never been successful, that's also a pretty big indicator that's probably never going to work.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely. And also, considering that no one, like, I have to make this very clear, everyone, assassination attempts very rarely ever succeed, especially if they're being conducted by an intelligence agency of another nation. Very rarely do they ever. Like, let's, for example, go through all of the presidential assassinations that have ever happened in America, and let's just say, well, let's just ask the question, were these people who ended up assassinating these folks affiliated with a with another government's organization, something like that? So let's go with the first one, which would be the most notable. And, let me just go pull up the list of presidents assassinated, because I know a few, and I want to make sure that I get all of them. So let's see. All right, so Abraham Lincoln was, of course, the first. John Wilkes Booth, not associated with anyone. Just some crazy guy who wanted the Confederacy to keep on existing. Boo-hoo, womp womp, does not exist. Shoots Lincoln in the back of the head. Not affiliated with the state organization. Then you have James A. Garfield. He was shot by a guy who was actually using a Webley Bulldog revolver, which is actually kind of a little cool. But nevertheless, once again, not affiliated with an external state organization of another nation, ended up being executed. Then William McKinley. McKinley is actually a really interesting one. McKinley got shot and actually died from gangrene. He actually died from an infection. Which is very unfortunate because, from what I understand, McKinley was actually a fairly interesting president. But anyways, moving on from that, McKinley was shot by a lunatic. Lunatic was not affiliated with state organization. They executed him, and then they put his body in a vat of acid so that way they didn't have to bury him and no one could go to a grave and treat him as a martyr or anything. Moving on to the next one, of course, everyone knows this one. JFK. JFK had his brain splattered across the back of a limousine. I believe wasn't it Dallas, Matthew?
Yes, it was, I believe.
Dallas, Texas. Isn't that interesting, man? I completely have not put the dots together on that until now. But anyways, shot in the back of the head in Dallas, Texas, magic bullet, all that stuff. You know, y'all know the trick. Y'all know the deal. But beyond that, shot by some guy, Lee Harvey Oswald, who was not affiliated with any external powers, any foreign nations, who was just a psychotic guy. Although some people do believe that guy may have been connected with the mafia, still not an enemy state organization. That is, you know, some internal dealings here in America, even if you want to believe that. But still, every single successful...
JFK had definitely made a lot of people angry, by the way. So, I mean, there was a lot of people who was probably wanting to get him. And he did actually piss off the mob as well. So there's a lot of people that were probably out looking for him.
But the big thing is still not enemy state organizations, still inside of America. And every single presidential assassination, including Kennedy's, works within the framework that the only successful assassinations have been conducted by crazy lone gunmen or people who are from America with internal American dealings. None of the assassination attempts ever conducted by any other countries around the world have ever been successful against a U.S. president. And even the attempted assassination today, from what we understand, although we don't have a lot of information about who tried to assassinate one of the presidential candidates, even they are believed to really have had no affiliation with anyone outside the United States, or really anyone inside the United States. It probably was just some sort of a deranged lunatic that tried to take matters into their own hands and do something.
Oh, who, the person today?
Yeah.
Oh, they're not sure yet. I don't even think they've given a name or who the person even looked like or anything like that. So at this point, it could be anyone. It could be maybe a foreign agent. There's no telling. It could be a U.S. citizen, but no information's out just yet.
That's true, and we'll have to wait and see, but still, I would assume, and I'm going to take a fairly big assumption here, they will probably find out that this was just a deranged lunatic or something along those lines. That's what I think, because the fact, I'll just put this out there really quickly. The fact that the person took about 8 or 9 shots at a presidential candidate and only one of them just grazed the ear and then the other 8 or so completely missed shows that they lack any kind of training whatsoever, especially from the distance we believe they were shooting, which it was maybe a little bit greater than 100 yards, which, to be quite honest, it's not that hard to hit a target at 100 yards. So I would assume that this person had practically no training and was firing from an unsupported position as well. So once again, showing they have no idea what they were doing. But nevertheless,
also, it sounded like a really small caliber as well. Like to me, it sounded like a 22 long rifle. Like the sound it was making. Obviously, I'm hearing it over a mic on a speaker, so it may not be totally accurate. But it sounded like probably a smaller one. And it sounded like the eyewitnesses said it sounded like a smaller caliber as well. So kind of interesting.
Well, let's see.
Also, it was about 400 feet away, by the way.
400 feet?
Yeah, they said 400 feet, approximately.
Do we actually know, because it was in Butler, do we actually know where it was? Because from what I heard, the shooter was on top of a stable. Could we find this place so that way we can try and figure out what building he was on and what kind of actual distance it was? Because now we're hearing from Ronald Mensch that the shooter was approximately 300 yards away. Dang, Walter E. Lakota, good Lord!
Thank you, Walter. That's huge support.
Huge thank you to Walter E. Lakota. Jeez, thank you so much. But Matthew, if we could find out, could you try and see if you could figure that out really quickly, where that was? Because if we could find out and figure out where this building was that this guy supposedly was at, that would probably help out a good bit on trying to figure out the distance there and see if this person was trained or untrained. Because if they were completely untrained, we'll get a very good idea that this was probably a individual who was a loon or something along those lines.
Yeah, let me see if I can find a trajectory map here, because there was one that I saw earlier, but let me see if I can spot it.
And I'm seeing some folks saying 120 meters, 150 yards, 300 yards. We're seeing almost everything in between. So let's see if we can try and get a fairly good ironing down of the distance here. And let's see here. Remember, and John Vance said, remember the drill sergeant's marksmanship speech in Full Metal Jacket? Yeah, I do. And it's let's see. Butler Farm Show, a fairground in the county. So we want to go to Butler Farm Show.
Also, by the way, go check our likes tab on Twitter, and you'll see an actual overhead image and also a little bit of a distance meter showing you where it came from.
Got you. So let's go take a look at that. Because, of course, we're on the topic of assassinations tonight, and considering that one almost happened today, it's a fairly opportune time to speak about it. So, from what we can tell, hey, wait a minute. Are we, like, right there? No, we're not. So we have a map here. Well, can we find this place? Butler Fair Show. Is that around here somewhere? Let me just type it in. Butler Fair Show. Butler Farm Show. Okay, so this is actually it. So, this is...
There's the building up there on the top right.
Yeah,
yeah, right up there.
Here it is. So we've been told, this actually looks, what is this? Let's drop down on the street and try and get a view of this building. Because I was told it was a stable. So this actually looks like some sort of a packing facility, or something like that. Let's see if we can actually get a sign out here on the street that tells us what this building is. AGR International. So this person was standing on top of the roof on the south side of the building of AGR International, and from what we understand, the presidential candidate was somewhere about right here, at this exact spot, actually on this little road right here. So if we were to measure that distance from there to the roof, and we were told that they were actually on this part of the roof, that is a distance of 127 meters, or approximately 120 yards, somewhere around that distance. So that is about exactly, well, just a little over 1 football field away. Now, if we were to make a couple of assumptions here, I would assume that this person was firing from an unsupported firing position, considering that setting up a tripod up there or finding any kind of a rest to put a rifle on would be pretty damn tough, considering that it's a roof, a flat roof of a building. So, going off of that, the shooter was unsupported, already a very amateur move for shooting at that kind of distance. And second off, from what we understand, only one shot grazed the presidential candidate, and every other shot ended up missing them and hitting bystanders in the crowd, or completely missing everyone altogether. And they were actually fired in very quick succession. Once again, showing with that kind of distance involved, absolutely no training whatsoever. And so going off of that, also another thing that would show absolutely no training is, from what we can tell based off of the one round that grazed the presidential candidate, the presidential candidate's head was being targeted as the round grazed the ear. So that is once again showing us that they were not experienced at all or trained, because you would know naturally that it is a body shot that you're going for at that kind of a distance, because hitting a head would be practically impossible. So all of this is showing that this person is completely untrained, and most likely a lone actor psychopath that was trying to dispense some sort of justice in their head. That most likely would be it.
Also, I see Austin H said in the live chat, how the hell did the shooter not get seen? And according to at least one or two of the bystanders, they said that they saw the guy over there. He was lurking around watching the whole thing happen, the speech. And then all of a sudden, he happened to go grab something. Then he climbed up a ladder to the top of the roof. And that's when he did the deed on top of the roof there toward the presidential candidate. So allegedly, according to some bystanders, it was about 3 minutes or 2 minutes or so, something like that, according to the person on the ground, that they were actually shouting and telling people, hey, look, there's a guy on that roof over there. And apparently nobody responded to it, which is kind of weird. But the guy apparently propped up a ladder to climb up on top of that roof, because someone had noted that there's no ladder seen on Google Maps right here. If you go down to an eye level, like, you shouldn't be able to see a ladder anywhere down here. But in a recent photo from today, there was a ladder propped up against the building, which presumably was put there by the guy who was doing the shooting. So just all the way around, kind of a little bit odd. But of course, they got to investigate and let us know some more facts first before we jump to conclusions.
And so going off of that, once again, just to put this all out there, because now we're kind of on the topic, so, you know, I think we're fine to talk about it a little bit more. The person clearly, to me, just everything that we're hearing right now and everything that we can assume, this person had to have been an absolute lunatic. Like there's no foreign involvement here. It probably wasn't the Chinese trying to send someone to snipe a presidential candidate. It wasn't the Russians. It wasn't anyone outside of America. This was probably a lunatic. And also, let me really quickly, let's see, Matthew, do we actually have a clip of the event when it happened? Like, do we have one that we could quickly reference really shortly?
What, the reaction of the hit?
Well, the entire situation, you know, the short little monologue that was happening right before then, and then the rapid shots that were fired. Do we have a clip of that?
Let's see. Let's see if I have a clip of that real quick. Let's see here. Yes, I do. It's check our likes tab, and you should see it.
Okay, so I want to make sure that we put this out there before I show this. Of course, we're going to be showing a presidential candidate. It was an assassination attempt on that presidential candidate. That's not what we're focusing on. We're going to be focusing on the rapidity of the shots, considering that we know that they were made at a distance of more than 120 yards away. So that's what we're paying attention to, considering that this was a major event today. Once again, I have to say this time and time again, no politics. We're addressing this as a situation that happened that's, of course, major news. It's breaking news that it happened at all. To any presidential candidate. We would be doing the same thing if it was the other side, but we're going to be looking at this really quickly to see how quick these shots were fired, now knowing that the distance was about 120 yards or so. So let's see what we've got. Okay, so let me see here. So we're going to watch the clip really quickly. So here it is.
I really see something that said, take a look at what happened.
See how quickly the shots were fired? Like, they were fired very quickly from that kind of a distance. There was absolutely no time to readjust for a shot. It was literally just pulling the trigger, one after the other, probably hardly aiming at all.
Yeah, good news as well, though. The counter sniper team by the Secret Service was able to take that shooter out. I think it was like in under 5 seconds, because once you heard the shots end, that was the moment that the snipers had taken the fatal shot on that shooter. So luckily, out of all the stuff that happened today, thankfully the snipers were not asleep at the wheel, because I think some other people might have been, but it's a little bit too early to say. But the snipers were pretty quick, thankfully. That stopped a lot of bad things from happening, I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely no doubt at all. But I'm trying to see really quickly if we can, because I will tell you this, when I saw this clip earlier, I remember that there were more shots than we're hearing in this clip. Don't you?
No, I think to me it was about 5 or 6, I recall.
So let's listen again.
I want to really see something that said, take a look at what happened.
Sounds like 3 shots. Like, it only sounds as though there were 3, and then there were echoes in the background.
Maybe so. But I'll tell you what, that sound right there, I know they're like, what is it, 120 yards away or something like that.
That's fairly loud.
That sound honestly does not sound like a 5.56 to me. I'm not a gun expert, but that sounds like a 22 long rifle if I was taking a stab at it.
I would say it probably was actually a 5.56, because at 100 yards, that kind of a report, that's actually fairly loud for 100 yards. Like, if you've ever been around long-range shooters and you get into a parking lot or something, the sound actually dissipates fairly quickly, even for the larger caliber rifle. So I would assume that it probably was some kind of a 5.56 or a 2.23 that was being used here. And everyone's saying it doesn't sound like a 5.56. We'll see. Of course, we'll get more information. We'll get information about the specific shooter, their age, the weapon that they were using, and a whole bunch of additional details about how they were trying to go about this. But we'll see here in the future. But I'm feeling as though it probably was a 2.23, because it's something to me that, sir, it sounds loud enough. It couldn't be a 22 at 100 yards. I just don't think it could be. So
I guess it could be a suppressed 5.56. That's an option. But then again, there's a lot of stuff you got to go through to get a silencer. Like, it's not just a simple thing. So, you know, I'm not going to go any further than that. But for the person to have a silencer and be pulling something like this off, I'd be somewhat surprised.
I would have to be entirely honest. I'd be wildly surprised, because up until recently, it took very, very long for a tax stamp to be approved to get a suppressor. So I would highly doubt that the guy was using one. And on top of that, they have a sharp enough report that it doesn't sound like a suppressor. And even if he was using a suppressor, then he's using supersonic rounds. And then once again, the guy has no experience at all, because if you're using a suppressor, you'd usually like to try and find subsonic rounds to use for that reason. So very interesting. Well, you know, of course, we'll get more information on this. We won't be reporting about this a lot on this channel, because, of course, it was a presidential candidate, so it always falls into a political vein. Like right now, we actually have people in the chat trying to push political opinions while watching someone possibly nearly get killed. Regardless whether they're a political person or not, I generally think that everyone can kind of agree. You know, I feel like it's a reasonable thing, regardless of what political affiliation you can take, that attempted assassinations on anyone is a big no-no, and of course a deplorable act by a sick and depraved individual. I think everyone can kind of agree on that. If you can't, I hate to say it, but I don't think you're a fit for the Lee Spring Army, because I generally like to support a position of common sense and reason and actual humanity instead of acting like some kind of a extremist, crazed lunatic about things. That's generally why I don't get into politics a lot at all anyways. But with that, I heard Saxu say, go back 1 second in the vid. So, see right here. So you see right here, this is something. The first shot was the one that grazed his ear. Because you can see by the way he flinched right here, notice. See how he moved really quickly like that? It whizzed right by his ear. He heard the buzz, or the snap, one or the other, and it clipped his ear, and that's why he flinched. By the time the second shot was fired, the second shot was, of course, missing. And that's when he touched his ear, realized that it had been clipped, and then that's when he started to get down. So the first shot was the only one that even came close. The other two completely missed the presidential candidate. So that's what I would have to go off of. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least about the whole assassination side of things with foreign agents trying to conduct assassinations. By foreign agents, they're just very rarely successful. And even with a crazed lunatic like that today, with it being unsuccessful, it was literally just millimeters away from being a successful assassination attempt. As just a moment ago, and some people have actually pointed this out, the presidential candidate's head was actually tilted in a way that if that shot had been fired just a second before, it would have probably impacted directly in the center of his face, and that would have been the end of that presidential candidate. But with
Man, that was like incredibly lucky that he turned slightly like that, because like you're saying, if it was like a millimeter back the other way, that would have been very bad. And also, I gotta say real quick, I gotta say this because it's on my mind, and it's not political, it's just a straight up thing, that I'm kind of with some of the people in the chat. I am somewhat shocked to see this happening. Like, you know, you hear about things like this happening in Russia and things like that in other places, but to hear it happening here, that is like insane to hear. Like, I'll be honest with you, I'm kind of down from seeing that earlier today a little bit. That is kind of disheartening to see that's actually happening in America. And that's not a statement on political parties. That's just a statement across the board, no matter who that was. If it was the president, a candidate, or whoever, or just a politician, or just a normal person, that is insane that people's taking shots at people over a disagreement and opinion. That is absolutely crazy to see. And I'll be very curious to see who the person was doing it and to see what their motivation really was behind it.
I would have to agree with that. I'm actually going to be honest with y'all. Hearing news about a presidential candidate, whether it's the sitting president or the one that we're talking about currently, getting shot at is wild. I mean, everyone has to remember that attempted assassinations are actually quite rare where a firearm is used like that. One of the last times we've seen that happen at a political rally would have been against RFK Jr. when he was shot inside of that kitchen a couple of times by a .22 long rifle, and he ended up dying from of course, from the bullets going into his head. Or another time would have been when George Wallace, which was actually one of the governors of Alabama, he actually got shot in the late 70s. And was paralyzed and became a paraplegic. Those were some of the last times that we saw an assassination attempt during a political rally. Of course, we've seen assassination attempts like the one on Ronald Reagan, which was actually on the sitting president. But during rallies, very rare. And also, Solstice Covers brought up the one that's pretty much identical to this one, which is the Teddy Roosevelt assassination attempt, where of course, deranged person came up to Teddy Roosevelt and shot him almost, I believe it was a little distance away, but it was very close, center chest, and the bullet actually ended up getting caught in his glass case, and I believe his Bible as well, which had some kind of a picture in it that had a lead backing, so it pretty much acted as a small piece of body armor right in front of his heart in his jacket pocket. But it's crazy to see this kind of stuff, and I absolutely hate to see it. It's very saddening. because I'm a huge, of course, many of y'all will know, I'm a huge patriot of the United States of America, and because of that, I believe greatly in the democratic process that America was really the first to pioneer in this form in the modern world. And that democratic process requires that both of the candidates, of course, survive the campaign to be able to make it to the presidential election every 4 years. And to see someone come forward, regardless, and I'm sure, of course, they had some sort of deranged motives, considering that we're believing that as an individual gunman, they had some kind of deranged motives for trying to assassinate a presidential candidate. It's just wild to see something like that attempted, because one would think that the United States would have a much more reasonable citizenry, or at least we wouldn't have bad eggs like that out there here and there. But every once in a while, they, of course, surface up. It's been a part of American history since this democracy was founded, but it's always a sad day to see assassination attempts being conducted on either sitting presidents of the United States or candidates for presidency or anything along those lines.
I just hope it doesn't start happening more often, because when I saw this going down earlier, it was shocking to see. Like everyone else, it was very shocking to watch and see. And then for a minute, I thought it was the worst. I was like, oh no, like the worst has happened. But thankfully, it didn't turn out like that. But I'm hoping it doesn't start happening more, because typically, like sometimes when things like this happen, it sends other lunatics into overdrive mode, and they decide to come out and start doing even crazier stuff, which it would not be good at all for anybody. So hopefully it ends with this one and it doesn't continue from here, because it could very well do that.
I would agree, and also I saw someone ask me, "And you'd still want to run for president?" Yes, I would. That's kind of the inherent dangers of running for president and being a president of the United States, is that there will be deranged, crazy people out there wanting to kill you. To be quite honest, we already deal with that threat every day just running this channel because of Hot Dog Man and him sticking his deranged people on us, and quite a many of them have made death threats of their own. We kind of deal with that stuff already, so we've kind of gotten a little used to it. But of course, on a presidential level, it's a lot more prevalent, it's a lot more dangerous. But I would have to say, it's just wildly saddening to see something like this. It really is. And of course, this isn't a political comment. I'm not saying that it's wildly sad because it happened to that specific candidate. It's just wildly sad to see anything like that happen at all to any candidate. It's just sickening, and to really think that someone would try and do something like that. Because you see, with a democracy, you don't have to end up killing your opposition. You just don't vote for them, and you vote for someone else. That's how the system works. Someone who's trying to usurp that entire system and the will of a nation, because let's say hypothetically that presidential candidate will win, or the other one will win. If someone assassinates one or the other, they are completely usurping the will of hundreds of millions of people here in the United States because of their own selfish interest in deciding to conduct a heinous, violent act against a candidate that is an option for the citizenry of this nation to select as their leader for the next 4 years. Regardless whether you like the person or not, and I'm saying this fairly for both sides, those kinds of actions are reprehensible, and I'm happy to hear that the counter snipers that were working in the Secret Service were able to work quickly and efficiently in taking that person out and making sure that they didn't end up harming anyone else or harming one of the options that America has for a future presidential candidate. That's just bizarre, and I hope that everyone understands here in this country that political standings are not any reason to wish death upon someone who disagrees with you or is a candidate for the opposition. That is never a position in the United States. You take out that kind of a frustration when you vote for someone. And if you end up losing, you just end up losing. That is what it is. And if you end up winning, rejoice. That's great. You won. But never to reach these kinds of depraved lows of seeing insane people trying to act out heinous acts like this. This is a wild thing to see. And I would,
It'll be even worse, because I'd seen a report earlier today. I'm not sure if it was credible or not, but there was a report out there saying that the guy might have been a Chinese national, and we don't have any confirmation of that. But if that's true, that could even bring even bigger complications into it, because then a foreign government might be having a hand in it as well. And we just simply don't know yet, because it's actually taken quite a while to get an ID on the guy to figure out who he is. I haven't seen any news articles coming out saying anything about the guy. So we're in the dark right now. So until we find out more about the guy's idea, it's really hard to put the puzzle together to figure out why this was done and everything else.
yeah, that's true. I would have to say that for sure. And also, by the way, no politics. I'm seeing, of course, people trying to take this as a chance to put politics in the chat. This isn't trying to say, and let me really quickly do that. We're not trying to say here because of course it happened against only one candidate, and it is a candidate that is attempting to become the president again. It's not the sitting president, which is the other candidate. So some people are trying to take the moment to spin it as the other side did this. We don't know who did this. This guy is probably not representing the other side at all. He's just a deranged lunatic that hates the specific candidate and wanted him dead. That's probably the exact reason that happened. And everyone's got to remember that these kinds of bad eggs are the folks that should be rooted out in society. People shouldn't be wishing death ever upon anyone in the government or any specific candidates, whether they be senators, representatives, presidents. The way you voice your displeasure with someone in the government is not by saying they ought to be hanging from a tree or that they ought to be taken out. You say something along the lines of, I don't like him, so I'm not going to vote for him, or I'm going to vote for the other guy. That's how a democracy works. That's how the Western world works. We are supposed to be far more civilized than the point of going to acts of violence to try and enact or instill the kind of thinking we want in this world. That's what the Chinese and the Russians do, and that's what this channel stands against firmly. That's what the Lee Spring Army stands against firmly, are dictators and thugs around the world who try and instill their ideas through the way of the sword. We try and instill our ways of thinking through the ballot box. Whether you support one or the other, that's up to you, but that's what the Lee Spring Army supports, is the right to choose and self-determining governments around the world, which is a key and integral part of this Western sphere. And I hope that everyone agrees with that. If you do, put an LSA in the chat. But of course, Matthew and me were a little bit shaken by that today. I'm sure many people here in the United States are shaken by that today, regardless of whose side they're on, because it's always unfortunate to see a deranged lunatic actually act out an insane action like that in front of the entire world. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, it's time for us to answer a couple of questions. And so what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so jumping in to our first Super Chat segment of the night, we have that massive donation that came in a moment ago from Walter A. Lakota Jr., who put in a $400 donation. Super close to the maximum Super Chat. And Walter, we appreciate that huge support very much. That is single-handedly helping keep the channel running tonight. And thank you very much, Walter, for that. He said, Aloha, Enforcer Matt, and LSA from OG Ellison Bosun. He said, it seems that things are heating up this summer, and a major pivot or turning point is going to happen this year. And nautical fact, belay means to cancel or disregard last order or command. And take one from the chat, and aloha.
I knew that, and thank you so much for the massive support, Walter A. Lakota. And it is, of course, the OG Ellison Bosun. And I gotta say, thank you so much for that wildly massive support, and thank you for saying belay is a real word, because I remember I said that one time around you, Matthew, and everyone else in the family, and y'all said, what the hell's belay? Don't you mean delay? And y'all made fun of me for it. It's a real word. I knew it. I didn't know it until now, and now I know it really was a real word. And I got to thank you so much once again for support, and of course, welcome back, Walter A. Lakota. It's good to have you back in the live chat. Thank you so much for throwing in massive support and helping this channel to keep on running. And things really are heating up this summer in Ukraine. Hopefully we'll see that the Ukrainians are able to hold their defensives and prepare for their counteroffensive that we believe is going to be happening in October. Because if they are able to succeed in doing that, then they will be in a very good position. And hopefully we'll see that the Russians will be in a very bad position by the end of this year or the beginning of next year. But still, thank you so much for sharing a naval fun fact. Thank you for being here with us tonight. And thank you so much for enjoying this channel so massively and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to make this thing possible day in and day out. I got to say, that kind of support is unbelievably massive. I don't even feel that this channel deserves unbelievable support like that, but we are still humbled and greatly appreciative that you enjoy the channel so much that you would support it that greatly. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, by the way, here, since we were just talking about it a second ago, I'm not going to go too deep into a rabbit hole, but I'm seeing here that it looks like the FBI might have an ID on the guy who did the shooting today. The FBI is allegedly saying there's a 20-year-old male from the local area where the rally was being held, but they're not saying his name. So let's see here. I was trying to see if I saw any pictures or video evidence of anything here. So it looks like that's all we know at the moment. So if we can find any pictures, we'll have to show them. But let's see here. So y'all recall there was a guy that was on BBC giving an interview that was an eyewitness to the whole thing. He said that they were trying to get the attention of law enforcement, Secret Service, and also the police to let them know that there was a shooter on the roof before he started shooting. And apparently a video came out proving that was indeed an accurate recounting of the events. I haven't got to watch the whole thing yet, but it looks like people were shouting, trying to tell the police there's somebody up there, but they just ignored everybody. So very interesting. Very, very interesting. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that is really interesting. And also, I'm seeing something incredibly interesting here. It looks like you've liked the video. We can't show this one, Matthew. I'm going to watch it really quickly on full screen on the second monitor. But it appears that it is a video showing the gunman having been taken out on the roof.
I've seen that one, yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. Huh. Yeah, he looks... I can't see his weapon. That's what I was trying to see. I can't see it, sadly, so I can't tell y'all what it was. And I can't tell... Like, I can't tell this, Matthew. I'm not really sure if he was standing or whether he was... Well, actually, no. Well, let me look at that again. We could actually tell that...
Prone.
Are you sure, though? Because I'm looking at it. I don't think he was prone because it looks like he actually fell down. So he may have actually been standing. Which would show no experience. Because also, if he was prone, he would have been in a much more stable firing position, and his shots probably would have hit, like, for sure. Because, you know, in case if y'all don't know, I've actually shot a great deal, and I am able to accurately hit a MOA grouping, which is about 6 inches wide, at 600 yards with an M4 with an ACOG. That is something that I am capable of doing, but I'm only capable of doing that from a supported firing position, meaning that my rifle is planted onto something that helps to stabilize it. That is something that I'm doubting. Well, if he had that kind of stabilization, if he was prone and somehow supporting that rifle at all, he probably would have been able to be way more accurate at 120 yards or so than he actually was. Because we do have to remember, he grazed the first shot, and then every other shot after that pretty much missed. So going off of that, I would have to say he probably was standing. Because also when you look at him, Matthew, I think you can watch the video right now really quickly too. It looks like one leg is bent back and one of his arms is in a weird position, and you can kind of see a little bit of his weapon jutting out just above his head, but it's a little distance away from him, and all that would have suggested he fell down instead of, you know, getting counter-sniped and then just kind of falling on top of his rifle.
Maybe so, maybe so. Me personally, I think he might have already been prone, and maybe he just got in a sort of mangled up way somehow, maybe from what happened after the hit. But also, by the way, you know, a 20-year-old, if that is indeed the case, would be very curious to know what the motive was behind that, because that'd be kind of crazy for a 20-year-old to go out and do something like that, of all people. But also, I see here, also, it just came out, by the way, it said, police are currently on the scene of the 100 block in Butler, which is where the rally was being held. It says they appear to be searching a van that was sitting there for hours with out-of-state plates. And also, they said the bomb squad's also on the way as well. So apparently there's stuff stationed around the area, which is a little odd and suspicious as well, including a van without plates or with out-of-state plates. So very interesting. Some very interesting pieces of the puzzle coming out. So I'll be curious to see how this turns out.
And also, let's see here. Someone said, let's see, couldn't hit a barn door. He was pretty inaccurate. Thank God, fortunately. Troubled kid, for sure. 20 years old. Now, that was the point I was wanting to get to right there. That reminded me. 20 years old. Now, if y'all don't know this, a federal law actually passed that anyone under the age of 21, now you can buy a rifle at 18, but if you're under 21, it takes multiple months for the ATF, which of course has to overlook every single background check, to approve you for purchase of a rifle. So not only did this person have to go through a Form 4473 to show that they were not mentally deranged and not a criminal and hadn't done any dangerous or criminal acts, they then had to wait, because they're 20, if we're assuming that they actually purchased the rifle, an incredibly long amount of time, months on end, to be able to get the rifle. Which is something that I have not heard anyone bring up until I just thought about that right then. So then I would show that would show, if he did personally own that rifle, that there had to have been a great deal of premeditation going on there, especially if he bought that rifle just before that rally, or he got into the works of getting that rifle so that way it was in his possession in time for that rally. That wouldn't show that he's mentally deranged. That would show that he had a lot of premeditation for this attempt today.
Yeah, it could be. And also, I see Koljack said, I've got images of his face. Do you want me to send it? If you could send that via DM on Twitter, if that's possible, that'd be great. Or you can email it to me. Either way, I haven't seen those images, and also I'm not sure if we want to show them on air because it could be unconfirmed. We don't want to misidentify somebody or something like that. But if you'd send those to me, I'd like to see them.
And some people are saying it was probably the dad's gun, stolen gun. That's a high likelihood as well. Usually a lot of deranged shooters nowadays in America usually never end up possessing their own guns. Very rarely do any of them. Most of them end up taking them from their parents or stealing them, usually from their parents. So that could be the case as well. Let's see here. Gun show loophole possible. From what I understand, loophole, the gun show loophole thing is a little bit of a myth because I've actually been to a couple of gun shows, and I believe that you still have to fill out a Form 4473 and go through an ATF background check to be able to purchase rifles from those vendors because the vendors are licensed FFLs, so they still have to follow applicable laws. But there is, if you want to call it a loophole, there is a bit of a loophole with private person-to-person purchases, as I believe that those do not require any form of a personal background check, specifically here in the state of Alabama. I can't speak for other states. Other states may have different statutes pertaining to that, but that could be a way that he was able to acquire a firearm under 20 quickly, is that he could have just purchased it on a person-to-person sale from someone else to him. So he could have done that. But the gun show loophole thing is largely a public misconception that's been thrown around a good bit because usually gun shows have some pretty stringent standards for who can sell firearms in the gun show, and they usually require that you have to be a licensed FFL, meaning that you have to do the whole Form 4473 and the background checks and all that stuff, unless if it's an antique firearm, and then you kind of get to circumvent all of that because it's not really considered a firearm, but that's a whole legal loophole and rabbit hole of its own. But let's see here. Do we have the pictures yet, Matthew?
So we don't have the pictures, and also I'm very leery about showing those pictures because there's been some fake ones roaming around. I think I've heard from someone on Twitter, and we don't want to like show images of someone who didn't do it and then later, get in trouble for showing somebody's face.
Yeah.
So, also, by the way, I do have a 3D image of the whole scene, by the way, that I just saw from the Intel Crab. If you want to go take a look under our likes tab, you'll see it.
All right, so let's go take a look at it. Okay, so here we go. This is actually a very interesting look at this. So here's the AGR International building, like we just pointed out a little while ago. Here was the Secret Service, which they actually were visible in a couple of films. You could see the counter sniper up here. He was actually, and this is the thing that I want to point out. The counter sniper actually had a tripod. I wish we could find that video. Matthew, do you think you could find me that video? Because that footage was taken from the right side of the podium. If you're facing the audience direction towards the presidential candidate. It was from the right side of the podium. It looked at the counter sniper, and then it panned to him, and then it caught the actual shots being fired in the presidential candidate getting down to the ground and the Secret Service hopping on top of him. And then the camera popped back up after a little while. If you could find that footage, we could actually
Under our
show...
like tab.
Oh, thanks. We'll hop to that in a second then. But you could actually see that these counter snipers had a supported rifle on a tripod, meaning that they were firing from a supported position, which is why they were able to pop off the one shot back at the shooter and take him out, unlike the shooter, which fired multiple shots at the presidential candidate and ended up not hitting a single one of them. Also, according to the distance that we're getting here, this does look like it's in line with about 120 to 130 yards. So that is a proper assessment of the distance, and to be quite honest with y'all, that is a good distance away, but that's not incredibly far, and that shot, if from a supported firing position, would not be that hard to make, especially a largely stationary target. So once again, showing complete inexperience, of course, once again, leading into this being a deranged individual and not affiliated with any major organization. But let's go take a look. And so let's see, where was that clip? Do we have it?
I should be under, like, at the top. If you go look at the right side, there it is. It just popped up.
There we
go. Right one.
And
so let me see here. So it doesn't really have a close zoom in, but you can actually see the counter sniper right up there. This isn't the video that I was talking about. The other one actually they zoomed in with their phone on the counter sniper for a brief moment, and you could see that they had a tripod and the rifle was set up on a supported position and everything, which is very important when talking about longer range accurate shooting. But they're right up there on that building to the left. But you know something interesting, Matthew, that I did not notice is that they already look like they're looking that way towards the ARG building.
Yeah, and one thing interesting as well is typically, I'm not an expert in Secret Service protocols or anything, but typically they go around the perimeter, even outside of the actual spot where the candidate will be standing. They'll go and survey the local area to ensure that there's no vantage points where someone could get at, like this guy did today. And it's kind of weird that the only other vantage point, obviously there's snipers right there on the first one, so they have that one covered. But they left open that major one right there where the shooter was sitting, and they're literally staring at it from right there on top of that rooftop, like you mentioned. That to me seems like a huge failure because it seems like they should have had snipers on the other roof, not only watching it, but also actually stationed on top of that roof. So the fact they weren't there seems to me like it could have been a security failure.
And I would have to say it does look like a security failure. Also, Matthew, I just want to throw this out there. It looks as though we're having some interesting folks show up and say some very interesting things in the chat. I just want to bring that to your attention since you're the one who usually moderates, and I don't want to pass any swift judgment of my own, not knowing what some people have said in the past. But still, this is a very interesting situation. Maybe we'll find out more information. I said we weren't going to cover this a lot tonight, and then we ended up doing it because, honestly, it's been on our minds, considering how shocking and upsetting this was to see something like this happen today against a presidential candidate here in America. This was one of the few things that I would actually end up covering. But still, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in from what the information that we have and what we can find. But we do have to get on back into Ukraine war news because we still have so much of it to cover inside of Ukraine. But with that, I still have to thank you so much once again for that massive support, Walter A. Lakota Jr., and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope we addressed that incredibly well, and thank you once again for making this channel a reality. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat of the night is another massive one, this time from Joseph M. Sika. Huge shout out to Joseph for the $150 support. Thank you very much for that. And Joseph said, that's why we have democracy. He said assassinations are meant for dictatorships. And he said he's of one political party, but he'd be on anyone's side because he's an American. He said this is disgusting. And just like when anyone threatens you guys, the bad part, the next one will be some idiot with a nuke in their backyard, he says. And also he said, not an a prez. And he puts in the Ukraine heart signs.
And I got to thank you for that massive support, Joseph M. Sika. And I feel like that is the kind of American thinking that should be prevailing in the modern day. And y'all have heard me make very fair comments and fair assessments about both sides and how extremism is starting to create a very dangerous environment in America, one where people view their neighbors as greater enemies than our foreign adversaries like the Russians and the Chinese. And I'm sure many of y'all have heard me say that in the past, and it's almost prophetic today as we're starting to see that people are really starting to take that into action. They're not just saying that, they're actually doing. And that's something that is really concerning to me. Of course, we've talked about that a lot tonight, Joseph M. Sika, but I believe that that's the way Americans should be. Politics is nothing more than a mere disagreement. And if the majority of the country sees it one way and they don't see it your way, you just got to accept that. You just got to bite the bullet and say that is what it is, regardless of however it goes. That's just how things work. And people just don't really get that a lot these days. And a lot of people want to believe that if one side wins and your side loses, now it's time to completely delegitimize the other side or to conduct acts of violence against them. And you know, a lot of people are going to be thinking, because a lot of people who are politically minded think that their party is the right and just party and the other party is the only one that does that. As someone who has sat back for many, many years now, and I've decided to take the third person on this and just watch and observe, it is actually both sides who attempt to delegitimize and conduct acts of violence against the other, especially on the extreme ends. And that is just not the American way to do things. That is a barbaric, backwards way of doing things, something that you would see in Russia and China, not something you should be seeing here in America, not something that you would see in any European country or any Eastern Asian country that is at one of our allies. You would never see this kind of stuff. And I think that it's just a bad, it's a terrible look. It really is a terrible look for something like this to happen. And it puts great concern on me for the current sitting president, because if a lunatic will attempt to take out a presidential candidate, well, hell, they could another psycho could easily try and take out the current sitting president, which is just as bad. I mean, it's a dangerous kind of a position to be in these days. It's one that we have to accept, but I feel like we need to be working as a nation towards being far more accepting and far more calm and collected in political discussions than it currently is. That's generally why I avoid politics at all, especially on the internet, is because it is such a wild and dangerous place these days that you really can't get into those kinds of discussions without facing some of the most violent and dangerous people in this country, to be entirely honest, from either direction. And so with that,
Also, by the way, I found that video you're talking about. You wanted to look for the counter sniper video. I have the video of him actually moving into action, like literally 4 seconds before he took the shot.
Really?
Yeah, I have that one on the likes tab.
Well, let's go take a look at it. I'm so sorry, everyone. I know that a lot of people are here for Ukraine war news. Please bear with us. This was a major event that happened in America today. Of course, it was very concerning for everyone, but let's go take a look at this clip. So yeah, look at that. They were already looking at him. That is interesting. So here's the clip.
And that's a little bit old, that chart. That chart's a couple of months old, and if you want to really see something that said, take a look at what happened.
Dang, that's interesting. So you know something that's interesting here? They were looking at the guy the entire time.
Yeah, that would explain why they got a beat on him so quick. And also, there was another person. I just saw another interview come out of a bystander saying they were trying to warn the police 2 or 3 minutes beforehand, and nobody would listen. Just, what? How? How does that happen? I mean, seriously. I'm not saying it's a conspiracy or anything like that. I'm not going to go that far, but are the people standing around really that incompetent that they're not listening to people shouting, you know, hey, there's a guy over here with a gun, and everybody's just running in circles acting like they don't see it? It's like, come on now. It's like, that seems pretty incompetent, if that's true.
That is pretty incompetent. It sounds like there was a massive bungle today in Secret Service security procedures, but that will be something probably for a congressional inquiry maybe, or maybe an internal review within the Secret Service. But still, that is whack. I mean, that video really does confirm they were sitting there just looking at the guy as he was setting up and everything on that rooftop.
Yeah, I just don't know how to explain that. I'm not going to go into conspiracy. I know some people are going to be like, well, the signs point to a conspiracy. We have no idea. We may never know, but it looks weird. I will say that.
Well, one thing I'll say is that they maybe didn't want, well, still that's bizarre. You know, like they're looking at the guy. He clearly has a firearm. He's in the line of sight of a presidential candidate. And they don't shoot? I mean, I would assume that they would shoot first and ask questions later in this kind of a situation. They probably have some sort of qualified immunity in that instance, possibly. But for them not to shoot at all until multiple shots have been fired? I mean, look at this. When the shots start firing, this guy starts to reposition and try and get ready for a shot instead of already being ready for one.
Really see something that said, take a look at what happened.
See right there. That's wild.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
That's weird.
But anyways, we do have to make sure to get on with the rest of the news. I do thank you greatly, though, so much for the support tonight, Joseph M. Sika. I hope I was able to address that well. And also, really, really interesting. Of course, and I have to say this really quickly, a lot of people are going into conspiracy theory territory in the live chat. I don't mean to discredit conspiracy theories or, you know, support them or anything, but I'll say this. Everything that happens in the world is generally the way you see it at face value. A lot of people would go, wow, the way they just hardly reacted at all, it would seem like a conspiracy. No, that would largely just be incompetence and ineptitude. That would probably be the actual answer to it. And then that requires us to beg the question, why in the world is the Secret Service being so slow to react and so inept in a situation when they already have snipers watching the guys set up and get ready to fire? That makes no sense. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the final question of this segment, and then we're going to finally be getting back into the news, and we still have lots of it.
All right, and this one goes to Rob the Crypto Snob, who puts in a $55 donation, and huge shout out to Rob for that very generous support as well. I'm just checking to see here. I think that may be... let's see, where'd it go? Okay, it's not Rob's first super chat, but huge shout out to Rob for that very generous support. He says, long-time viewer, and it was great to catch this live for a change, and the time difference is a struggle, but I watch all the videos and keep up the good work, and greetings from Amsterdam, and yes, it's almost 5 a.m. here, and good night.
Good night to you, Rob the Crypto Snob, and thank you so much for being here so early in the morning, and also, it's great to have you here live. That is incredibly cool, and thank you so much for being a long-time viewer and enjoying this channel, and thank you so much for just massively enjoying it and supporting it. We try our best to get the news out every single day. Of course, today's been a little bit of a odd day. You know, we've actually covered a decent bit of what happened here in America, more so than in Ukraine, but it was a once in a lifetime kind of a historical event. Probably many people won't see anything like this again on that kind of a level or form. But still, thank you so much once again for watching all the videos. Thank you for watching the streams, and thank you for wanting us to keep up the good work all the way from Amsterdam. That is incredibly cool, and thank you so much once again for enjoying this channel and helping us to keep this thing running. And also, GW North assault rifles, if you want to call them that, they do kick. Like they do kick. I've shot them. They do. But moving on from that and into the rest of our news, and thank you so much once again. Where the hell did my spreadsheet go? Rob the Crypto Snob for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. We are now moving on into our location unknowns. And we are going to have to take the hit tonight because I'll be entirely honest with y'all. We have talked a lot about things that are outside the Ukraine war news. I'm not going to speed up the Ukraine war news now because of that. That was kind of an option that Matthew and me took to talk about it a little bit and break down a little bit of what we see and what we're thinking. So I'm not going to speed through the news here. We're going to make sure to get through it at a normal speed. So if the stream ends up being a marathon one, it is what it is because we had to cover the major event that happened today here in America. But we got to see pictures of recruits from the 58th Brigade conducting some training. Pretty cool to see, and also I love the flowers. Like, that looked really nice. I don't know if that's heather or lavender, but it looks really cool. Yeah, I like that a lot. Really neat. But moving on from that and into our next bit of location unknown news, we also got to see that the Russians are carrying around bombs on bikes. I'm not joking. They actually tied up a bomb-carrying trolley carrying a bomb on an airfield near an Su-34 to a bicycle. And that's how short supply of actual vehicles they have for the Russian Air Force to even conduct ground operations with. So with that, pretty wild to see. Never seen much like that before. And moving on from that, we also got to see some drone-on-drone violence happening today. It looks like the Russians are trying to target this Ukrainian drone right here. And dropped a net on it, like some medieval stuff. Like, it's like, what the hell?
I guess you said the Ukrainians bagged it up.
Man, I'm telling you what, man, it's really bizarre. But moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see some Ukrainian Mad Max anti-air. It's a Gush gun mounted onto a Zil. This is pretty Mad Max as it gets. I always like these air defense systems. They're not the most effective thing against most targets, but still pretty cool. I don't think anyone can disagree with that. But moving on from that and into our next bit of news, we also got to see the Russian losses for the past 24 hours. And great googly boy!
Man, we got 13 Bobcats. I'm telling you what, it's crazy out here. 13 Bobcats and it's over 1,000 troops every day at this point. I'm not even shocked to see it, but that is crazy.
Man, I'm telling you, it's like a normal day at this point. But 1,120 Russian soldiers have been wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 24 APCs, 52 supply trucks, 8 main battle tanks, 58 artillery pieces. The counter battery was insane. 34 drones, 1 anti-aircraft system, and 13 Bobcat skid steers. That is pretty wild to see. And I gotta say, wonderful to know that the Ukrainian armed forces are continuing to inflict such wildly high casualties onto the Russian Federation, and it is good to know that the Ukrainians are holding a very strong and successful defensive operation. Meanwhile, on the Vovchansk front, we only got one clip today from the area, but it was of an FPV drone hitting a Russian APC. Check it out. And we can see our drone circling the APC right here and getting ready to knock it out. It already appears to have been disabled, so it's just an extra hit to make sure that it is completely destroyed. And we also see a couple of additional Russian vehicles burning in the background here.
A little bit of static.
Ooh, and dead on
signal.
Dude, dead on the nail. And we see the fire now burning on that APC. And that's the end of the clip. Really nice to see the Azov still knocking out Russian vehicles in this part of the front. Meanwhile, in the northeastern area, we also got to see an S-60 anti-aircraft gun obliterated, blown up, smashed to pieces. Check it out. And we can see the drone flying on in. And we can see another one flying on in to hit the vehicle again. We can see a fire started in front of it. And we can see a third one coming in. I mean, they're just triple dipping. And dang, thank you so much for the massive support tonight, BC Skyman.
Dang, yeah, thank you to everyone tonight. The support's been massive.
Yeah, it's been unbelievable. And we can see the next drone lining up and getting ready to make a hit. And we can see this one coming down. And really quickly, everyone, of course, I have to say this a little bit more tonight than normal, but we have a no politics and no religion rule on this channel. It's just kind of working off of the old rules of civility. You know, you don't talk politics and religion in public around a group of folks that you're hanging out with. That's kind of what we believe in. Of course, I know, and I will say this because a lot of people are going to say, "Oh, he brings up the attempted assassination, but he doesn't allow politics." Yeah, like I don't allow domestic political topics to be brought up and talked about on the stream, but you know, considering that someone almost just got shot and killed today, we will bring that up and say that that was a horrendous thing, because that just seems as though it would be human nature to say something like that. But moving on from that and a little bit further down the lines and towards Crimea, we also got to see some Colombian soldiers in the Crimea forest wearing a gas mask, because apparently the Russians are attacking them with CS gas, or as it's called, chlorpicrin. And we see them here looking over the front. We can see a little bit of this gaseous stuff lingering around over there. And we can see these Colombian soldiers wearing the gas masks. Man, that's actually not a bad gas mask.
Pretty classy looking. Also, sorry, I was distracted for a second. I was sitting here looking at these images I was sent by some of the viewers, allegedly, of the shooter down. Now, I think this is definitely our guy, because it appears to match up.
Let's see here. Are they in our messages on Twitter?
No, it's in my email. And also, we definitely, absolutely cannot ever show this on stream. Definitely not.
Too gruesome?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Oh, I mean, like, where'd they get them?
It's from X, and also it appears to be from the site, because it looks like the officer, I recognize him from another shot, so it looks like it's the real deal.
Well, no, I mean, like, where did the counter snipers get him, you know?
Oh, right where it counts.
Between the eyes?
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah. I should have expected that. But moving on from that, we did get to see a 2S1 Avdiivka SPG moving on through the countryside near to the area of the Crimea forest. And there are some Ukrainians on the side of the road. And Joseph Manson is talking about how to get suppressors. It's actually fairly complicated. Like, you have to provide digital fingerprints. It's a really in-depth process, actually. And so and also they require a photo picture of it. So pretty much what you do is you book yourself to be able to get a suppressor. So they have all of your information, your fingerprints, your picture, what you look like, all that stuff, before you're ever even allowed to go through the process of trying to get a suppressor. It's actually a pretty in-depth process. And then it requires you to pay for a $250 stamp. And the stamp, really the stamp for our British viewers, is more like a writ. It just allows you to possess the item. So it's like a writ of ownership, I guess is the best way to put it. But moving on from that and down to the Bakhmut area, we also got to see that a Russian outpost got blown up down here by the 30th Brigade. And here's our Russian outpost. It is literally a junk pit. No joke. And so the Ukrainian drone comes over. The Russians start running immediately because they know what's up. And we can see the drone continuing to hover around. The Russians are still running away.
Man, they're not sure where they're running, but they're running. Oh.
Ooh. Nice little ammo.
A little bit of hot fire.
Man, a little bit of a hot sauce. And we can see a Russian now running back. That's a bad idea.
He said, "Bliat, lightning never strikes twice in the same spot, Bliat."
Look at it. He said,
but this is not lightning.
Man, goofy guy. Oh, what a goof!
Tell me. Let me go kick this fire. I'm telling you, man, these Russians have a thing for fire. Like this, it's a compulsion.
Dude, he just keeps kicking everything and it turns into napalm. It's like, when will you learn? Just stop kicking the crap. Let it burn. And so he just keeps kicking everything. Like he's not stopping the kicking. And also, Alpha, you're correct. It's just that I'm bad at pronouncing that kind of stuff.
Look at him. What is he doing? Like waving at the camera? What the hell's this?
What is this? Like, yeah, the dude.
Yeah.
I was
Man,
taking
that dude is pumping that car.
I don't understand what this is. What is this? Like, what are we watching?
I'm confused at this point. I'm like watching an entry. Uh-oh. Oh, damn. Man, what the hell?
I don't even know what that
I think I was about to
was.
get murked by that freaking, like, monster dog in the back.
Man, dude. We're moving on from that, where we got to see more Russians getting blown up near Chasiv Yar. And here they are. And are they on electric scooters or something? Oh, one of them got hit.
Oh. Man, it's the Russian clown army coming in on those unicycles again.
Riding motorcycles. Dude, those are some tiny motorcycles if they are.
Man, this is like the clown army type activities right here.
Dude, this is crazy. I can't believe this. Oh my goodness. I think he's now. No, he kept going actually. The other guy stopped. Okay, they are on motorcycles though. Man, people keep on asking about the hot dog man's take. Yeah, have you seen that? Like how many people have asked? Like 5 people.
I think I've seen 1 or 2, but it's like, who cares? I don't even know what does it really even matter what that guy has to say, really? Because he's not monetized on Twitter.
Yeah, and like, what does it matter? And also, I'm sure it's something absolutely stupid. Like, if I had to take a guess, like, if I really did have to take a sincere guess, I'm sure it's something like, well, I guess he gets what's coming to him. It's probably something along those lines. I'm not going to lie. Like, I don't even have to go over there to know that someone deranged and stupid like him, who has already threatened us with harm, him personally, has doxed us and encouraged his viewers to want to wish harm upon us or actually harm us. I know that his opinion will probably be one that's very stupid and violence-oriented, kind of like a crack fiend like him would be. That's just natural for him, I suppose, in his natural habitat.
If you want brain rot, go right over there to Hot Dog Man's camp because you'll get plenty of it. And I'm telling you what, that's not what we do here. None of that brain rot. I'm telling you, keep that over there and keep it nice and over there.
Oh yeah, that's it. And we can see here 2S3 Akitsia. These are the larger kind of a version of a Avdiivka. I can't pronounce it correctly, but dang, look at that thing blow up. And it looks as though it's turned into pieces.
It is turned into pieces.
Reese's Pieces. Reese's Cup. Reese's Cup. Eat 'em up, eat 'em up, eat 'em up, eat 'em up. Reese's Cup. But moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see a Bradley firing on the Russians today. Check it out. This is a part of the 47th Magura. Oh, dang, dude.
Oh, something just went off.
Okay, we can't unmute it, though. Like, I unmuted it here, just absolute trap bass. I'm like, yeah, we can't unmute that to figure out what happened. So it looks like the Bradley's actually getting hit by stuff as it's continuing to move on along. And we can see it continuing to truck forward. trying to make it towards the Russian positions to fire on them. And it's still going. I mean, it's been hit several times. It's still trucking on along. And now we can see a normal view what the Bradley's doing. And now we can see it's still moving. It's still getting fired at, and it's still just trucking on along. This is actually really impressive for a Bradley to endure all of this. I mean, dang.
I think the Ukrainians have taken the durability test of the Bradleys to a whole new level. I don't think they've ever been used like that.
Stress test to the extreme. And now here's a clip of the Bradley actually using its gun. This one, once again, also in the 47th Magura. I feel like this is a duplicate.
Could it be?
I think it is, because I think we watched this yesterday and it was extremely loud and we were screaming over each other. So with that, we're now moving on into the area of Kherson, because there actually nothing happened in the southern front today. It was largely uneventful in video and picture evidence, but near Kremki, we got to see that the Ukrainians blew up another BMD-4. Once again, playing some kind of weird techno music over it. And right into the commander's hatch, blowing up inside, and of course it'll detonate the ammo here soon.
Oh, I see a fire in the bay.
Man, a fire in the bay. And we didn't get to see
we didn't get to see a turret toss. Man, what the hell? We got robbed.
Dude, that was jipping me. Like, I want a refund. But moving on from that and into our next clip, we did get to see a Russian Mr. S burning. This actually looks like it's from a horror movie. Feel free to screenshot. And then finally, we got to see the aftermath in the morning. The thing had burned down completely. And that Mr. S has officially been destroyed on the front line. And so with that, we are now going to be moving out of the Kherson front and on up into the area of Kyiv, because we might have a speech from Zelensky at this point. We didn't have one earlier when I put this up, but let's see if we do. Let me go check his YouTube channel and see if he does. We will see. And so let me go.
He has to have speech. It's not the proper stream without speech.
And so let me see. Let's see. President of Ukraine. President of Ukraine. Office of the President of Ukraine. And then we want to go to the speech. And so, do we have a speech from today? We do not have a speech from today. And that means Slava Ukraini! And we have reached the end of this news segment. I've got to thank you all so much once again for watching. We were able to cover a lot of Ukraine war news and also the news of the massive event that happened here in America today. Of course, that was very out of form for this channel. We very rarely cover anything that even comes close to touching any kind of a domestic political topic, but considering the severity and the extreme tragedy of the news that unfolded today, we thought it would be worthwhile to at least give mention and talk about it a little bit, especially since most of our audience are American viewers, and this impacted Americans of every kind, people who either supported the presidential candidate or didn't support them. But nevertheless, I got to thank all of y'all so much for watching this news so far. We still have a lot to go, and we have loads more to talk about. We get to talk to all of y'all, which is incredibly fun. And by the way, I feel like I need to mention this before we move on into this question segment, because it is the last day that this is going to be up, is the limited edition Bot Be Gone t-shirts. Hey!
Oh, yes. The Bot Be Gone merch. That's what I'm talking about, yes.
This is actually some of the last few hours here. We'll probably be live for about another hour and a half guaranteed, maybe another 2 possibly, although that will be very much stretching it, maybe another hour and 50 at best. But these shirts will be available until the end of this stream. These are the limited edition Bot Be Gone t-shirts, and I gotta say that this is a great time to not only support the channel but also support Ukraine, as 10% of the profits are donated directly to United 24. And not only that, these t-shirts are incredibly high quality. They are a Gildan fit or classic fit actually, made by Gildan, incredibly comfortable, well made, 100% US soft cotton, comes in multiple different sizes from small to 5XL, and comes in also a wide variety of colors: black, sand, military green, navy, dark heather, and light pink. Overall, it's an amazing shirt, and getting one helps this channel to keep on running, gives you something cool to remember a nice joke about the channel's history, and not only that, it helps to support Ukraine as well. And if you want to get one of these, make sure to go to officialenforcerstore.com. You can type that in the search bar and go straight to the website, or you can click on the link in the description below, which will also take you directly to the website where you can get yourself one of these shirts. And so with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well, and make sure to get one while time still exists to be able to get one, because after this stream is over tonight, these will not be available any longer, so make sure to get one while you can. But with that, it is time for us to now move on into the remainder of the questions that we have tonight. And so, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so jumping right back into our Super Chat segment, the final one of the night, that is. This Super Chat goes to BC Skyman, who puts in an $80 donation combined. And thank you very much, BC. Like we always say, almost every single night, for always supporting the channel through and through, and we greatly appreciate that support, and also your viewership over the many years. We appreciate it very much. And Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta say, a massive thank you so much for the support tonight, BC Skyman. You didn't throw in any comments, but the support is, of course, incredible and helps us to keep this channel running. It is great to know that folks like you are always with us and enjoying this channel, enjoying the news that we put out, and supporting it to help it to keep on running. Tonight, so far, about 44,000 people have watched this stream. And out of all of those people, only about 30 or so have thrown in a super chat. I think it's actually a little less than that. But the small group of folks like you, BC Skyman, who support this channel, make this channel ad-free and sponsor-free and possible for everyone else to get the news for tens of thousands of people. And I gotta say that we're greatly appreciative to everyone who supported the channel tonight, especially including folks like you, BC Skyman, because you all helped to make this channel possible for everyone out there in the world to be able to watch and listen to. And so with that, thank you so much once again. Thank you for the kind words as well, BC Skyman. I see you just throwing them out in the live chat, and that is incredibly nice of you. And I thank you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one is going to go to K-Dub Janky, who threw in a $50 donation. Also extremely generous support, and thank you very much for that support. They said, it seems that representative government is a rarity, and Asia seems to gravitate towards dictatorship over history, and maybe it started with Genghis Khan. And why is Asia mired in dictators while the West is a representative system?
That is a very interesting question, K-Dub Janky, and a lot of Asia does end up falling into being very authoritarian. I would say it probably is because of Mongol influence. The Mongol Empire largely influenced a lot of how governance operates, really through most of Asia, some of the Middle East, and also in a little bit of Eastern Europe as well. It is really it's really something that I believe was a major molding or defining part of how a lot of governments around this part of the world work. But one thing you will notice is that a lot of East Asian countries are actually democratic, like South Korea, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, Taiwan, and the Philippines. But one thing that is inherent amongst all of those countries is that the reason why they have existing democratic and self-determining forms of government is because of heavy Western influence or heavy U.S. involvement in the formation of those countries in the modern day. America didn't really create the democracy that exists in Taiwan, and we really didn't create the democracy that exists in South Korea directly, in all honesty, but we did a lot to mold these countries to where a democracy would end up existing in them. Because originally, South Korea and Taiwan, when we originally became allies with them, were both dictatorships through and through, but over time, American and Western influence started to slowly morph them into democracies like we see today. Japan actually had a democracy that was heavily based off of a great deal of Western influence, particularly from Britain in the Meiji Restoration, where they ended up bringing forward a somewhat of a constitutional monarchy in Japan. The emperor really didn't have any kind of power at all, even in World War I or World War II. It was mostly the Japanese parliament that had the power, but still, it's a really interesting thing that after World War II, of course, America started to influence Japan a little bit further, and Japan truly became a democratic society of a modern form. And of course, Australia and New Zealand are literally British offshoots, so of course they would have some sort of a parliamentary system that is self-determining in its own right. So those are pretty self-explanatory. And then the Philippines were actually a territory of the United States before World War II, and then after World War II, they became an independent country. But once again, the groundwork had been laid due to heavy U.S. or Western influence for a democracy to exist that still exists to this day. And so that's really the reason why democracies exist at all in East Asia. And if it wasn't for the fact of Western influence on those countries, they may also be authoritarian regimes as well. It's a lot easier to have an authoritarian regime than it is to have a self-determining government. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and I thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel keep on running. And Nova actually threw in an interesting comment, though, before I move on, KW Nova said there was success in Vietnam, even though they are communist, they participate in free trade. But we could make that same argument, though, Nova, for the Chinese, because the Chinese actually practice a limited form of capitalism in the special administrative regions or the special economic zones. Like, for example, Shanghai, which is a special economic zone. They do practice capitalism in limited forms there, which would make a little bit of an argument that they're not exactly authoritarian. But in my honest opinion, a capitalist, a limited form of capitalism doesn't necessarily dictate a form of non-authoritarianism. It is just more so authoritarianism taking advantage of a free market and a competitive economy to be able to try and get the advantages while at the same time maintaining a tight grip on government control and making sure that their nation isn't really self-determining. Because out of the entire People's Republic of China, the only people who are allowed to vote in China are members of the Chinese Communist Party. And out of the 1.4 billion people, 1.3 billion people in China exactly, only 100 million of them are Communist Party members, meaning that less than 10% of the population of China is allowed to vote on anything at all. Which is very undemocratic, very non-self-determining. It is pretty much a small, well, it's a very large oligarchy of a form, but still an authoritarian leadership nevertheless, because Xi Jinping is pretty much a leader for life at this point. But with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. Thank you so much once again for support, Janky, and I hope that adding on a little bit to what Nova threw in was interesting as well, whether it is agreed upon or disagreed upon. But still, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, real quick, I don't want to return back to it again, but I just saw something very interesting about that shooting we were talking about today. You were talking about Enforcer, whether or not the guy was prone or was he standing or crouched when he shot. The photo here that we just got shows the guy clearly. He's prone on top of that building, and it looks to be like maybe some sort of AR-style rifle that he has in his hands. And he was clearly looking through some type of optic or something, trying to line up the candidate there. What looks to me like he was trying to line him up to really do him in, like not trying to graze him. That seems to be an accident. It looks like he was trying to get him. So, unfortunately, you want to take a look at that photo. It's in your DMs on Discord if you want to show it. It's actually safe to show.
Actually, I'm looking at a video right here. I'm going to like it so that way you can see it later, because it's actually showing him up there. And someone in the crowd, while my esophagus collapses right there, someone in the crowd actually yelled to the guy his name. They said, "Crooks, what are you doing? Get over here." And then he started firing, and then he got shot. Yeah, so people in the crowd actually knew who he was.
Huh, that's interesting. Also, by the way, that is the same guy right here that I have a photo of, finished off. It's the same guy.
And where's that photo?
It's in my email.
And how am I supposed to see it?
Oh, you can't see this one right now. You'll have to see this one later.
And so what was I supposed to be looking at? Like, because I went to Twitter to look at
No, look at your Discord DM. Your Discord DM.
Oh, let me pop that up on my phone really quickly, so that way I don't show it on air, just in case. Yeah, that's the video I got. Like, there's a whole video. That's a frame in the video.
Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't got to see the whole video yet, but that guy was definitely prone, and he was definitely trying to get a kill shot going on.
Oh, yeah.
He looks like a nut. Like, straight up honest, he looks like a pure nut.
Yeah, he's got that kind of a haircut that hot dog sellers have, you know what I mean? Like, he actually does. Like, do you see that?
Yeah, kind of. It's a little bit weird.
Yeah.
I won't make any more further comments, but it's a little bit weird.
Yeah, that's pretty weird. But yeah, we actually got footage of the guy setting up on the roof. Let's see. So let's see here. I'm looking. A lot of people. Okay, so now to get y'all the story, like just to let y'all in on a little bit more that we found out in the meantime, because I was just quickly taking a glance around. People saw him go to the building with a ladder and start climbing up onto the roof with the gun clearly visible, and started to immediately tell police, there's a guy over there with a gun who's climbing onto the roof, and nobody did anything. And the guy got onto the roof and then started to shoot at the presidential candidate. And then the counter snipers finally shot back at him. But he was up there for quite some damn long time, and a lot of people knew about him while he was going there. So this appears to be a complete blunder on the security elements end of assessing threats and dealing with them before they started to possibly threaten the life of the president, the presidential candidate. And so
Also, that does back up the stories of the eyewitnesses on the ground that said that there was literally a couple of minutes that went by after they were trying to warn everybody, screaming, yelling, and pointing. There was like minutes that went by before anybody finally reacted and took the guy out. And that was after the bullets started flying that someone finally shot him. So that's just crazy. Also, he apparently brought a ladder with him to get on top of that roof, because there's a ladder back there on top of it. So brought a gun, brought a ladder, knew where he was going to go, apparently thought about where he was going to set up, and has the proper equipment to pull it off, but luckily didn't have the proper skill to pull it off, or otherwise that could have ended much worse.
yeah, I mean, just think, if the guy had had any kind of shooting experience at all, that shot probably would have been a successful one, and we would be looking at a much more different story right now. We would be talking about an absolute tragedy. You know, like it was close to being a tragedy. It was literally just a millimeter off. But we would have actually been talking about a real tragedy at this point. And also, I think, Matthew, in the chat, that people are repeating a name in the chat. It does look like that's been confirmed to be the identity of the person. We're still going to hold off on that just in case and wait until we get actual confirmation through and through before we report something like that. But yeah, apparently the guy was just some local nut who took it upon himself to try and assassinate a presidential candidate. That was literally just what happened. It was just a deranged lunatic.
Yeah, it's just crazy. Like, it's just crazy. I'm going to stop right there because I'm going to end up like delving into politics in a minute, but it's just bad to see.
Yeah, pretty rough to see. But with that, I hope that does give you a little bit more information about what happened with that. But still, let's see here. He was also hit once in the chest, but he was wearing a bulletproof vest. Huh, that's news to me. I didn't see that. And also, it'd be really weird to hit him in the chest because he was prone, from what I could tell. He really was prone. So I guess the picture that we saw afterwards, Matthew, where his leg was bent behind him and one of his arms was in a weird position, considering where he was shot, that probably was some kind of like a nerve reflex. Like he kind of just started to, go into like a bit of a seizure or something in his final throws. Yeah, I think that probably was what it was. But that is still... that is still wild. That's bizarre. But anyways,
I will say though that even though the Secret Service had a blunder there, like not securing that roof, at least like I said earlier, the sniper was on point. I mean, that shot that the sniper sent off was literally a couple of seconds after the shooting started, and it was quick, rapid, and that shot was literally dead on target, bullseye, 100%, like no doubt about it. So at least the police sniper, whatever sniper that was, they knew what they were doing, and thankfully the shooter didn't know what they were doing.
Yeah, yikes. That was tough. Let's see here. Someone, let's see. Interesting, registered. Interesting. Someone said they were actually, I will be honest with y'all. The thing is that with lunatics like that, you just can't really predict what they're going to do. Like, they're lunatics for a reason. But that guy was a legitimate nut. Like there's like it's become very clear, because a lot of people, of course, have been throwing around conspiracy theories that this guy is this guy and so and he's doing this or that and he's affiliated with these people. It really just does look like the guy was just a lunatic who lived in the local area, and the presidential candidate ended up showing up nearby, and the guy thought, well, he's close nearby, let me go try and shoot him. That's literally what it looks like it ended up being the case of. And I gotta say, it's wild, man. Like, you very rarely see mental nutcases take it upon themselves to actually carry through their depraved mindsets like that. That's very rare.
Yeah, that is rare. Also, let's see here. I was looking. Let's see. Comment on the events. So apparently, let's see here. I'm going to be hesitant to say this, but apparently the guy that took out the shooter was a world-class sniper, apparently well known. I won't say his name, though. I'm not sure if this is the actual guy. This is some Twitter post here. But it looks like a couple different people were saying that the guy that took him out was a world-class sniper. So that might explain why the shot was so quick and so on target. But also now I see that the FBI is now saying that they're kind of shocked about how long it took before the Secret Service finally spotted the guy and actually ended up engaging the guy, which is obviously, you don't have to be an expert to know that. It took a long time. There was literally a couple of minutes that went by before they were able to spot the guy. And he apparently had set up a whole ladder and everything. So the fact that the police or nobody saw that was kind of shocking. But a lot of pieces of the puzzle coming out here. And I'm sure that tomorrow we'll have a lot more detail on it. But right now it's still a little bit early. But that video you're talking about, Enforcer, is wild. I just see them calling out the guy's name. So apparently he was known in that group on the ground, which is also another complication. Yeah, I just watched it just now.
Yeah, that is wild. I've never, like, that's crazy. People in the crowd literally just knew this guy. Like, they were like, hey, what the hell are you doing up there?
I wonder if he'd been casing these rallies the whole time, like blending in like a candidate supporter, and then suddenly turned around and, did this, which was his real true intentions the whole time.
Maybe. But then again, they said that he just walked up to with a ladder, and he wouldn't have really been able to walk into a rally with a ladder. That would have been a little weird. So I don't know. Maybe I guess the guy just drove in over there to the AGS building, just walked up, well, the AGR building, walked up onto the roof with a ladder, set up, got prone and everything, and everyone, of course, like, you got to be thinking, man, like, let's go back to Butler really quickly, because this is something that is whack to me, and I'm really trying to wrap my head around this. So here, it should be in my search. There we go. And so let's go out here, because this is where it was. So this is where the rally was. The presidential candidates here, the counter snipers are here. This guy is right over here on this part of the roof, exactly right there. People in the rally, which are over here, are watching him on film, like you saw it, Matthew, and they're saying, hey, what are you doing up there? Get down, man. Like, get over here. And he's setting up. Everyone's watching this guy because he had to have walked up to the point where he got prone. So you see a guy with a rifle walking around on a roof right outside the security perimeter. The counter snipers are clearly watching him and watching him set up and get ready to shoot at the presidential candidate. And no one did anything until shots were fired. No one did anything until after the shots were fired. And then we heard that chaos broke out on the ground. Apparently, the counter snipers never told anyone that they had eyes on a potential threat outside of the security perimeter. So local police are running around with their heads cut off on the ground. The Secret Service is doing the same. The counter sniper shot the guy fairly quickly, apparently, right as the shooting was going on. And the guy was pretty much dead the entire time everyone was running around trying to find him. And then they find out he's dead. I'll be honest with you, the picture that's unfolding right now is making the Secret Service look like an embarrassment. And it really begs the question if the current sitting president right now can really trust the Secret Service to protect his life, considering that they're hardly able to protect the presidential candidate's life.
Is it true, though, that the presidential candidates, they actually get less protection because they're not an active president? Because I've heard rumors that the actual active president gets a different level of Secret Service protection versus a non-president.
I would say, yeah, I would think so. But the thing about that, though, is that the presidential candidate we're speaking of is a former president, meaning that he has full-on presidential Secret Service details, at least for the next 10 years, meaning that his Secret Service is as beefed up as the current sitting president's. So if their security detail fumbled like that, is the security detail of the current sitting president good enough? Like, is the Secret Service even up to par at all across the whole level?
Yeah, they get trained. Like, everybody always, like, really amps up all the rhetoric about how well the Secret Service are trained, and it's true, they get trained quite a bit. But at the same time, there's so many of these events that take place, like these political events, and the Secret Service are always going out here, there, over here. And I wonder if over time, complacency just sets in, and they're thinking, oh, nothing's going to happen this time. It didn't happen the last 50 times. And then they get complacent. They're not ready for something to happen. And when finally something does go down, they're like, oh, it's nothing. It's just someone being loud. Someone's being obnoxious over there. Or it's just some guy who's wanting to see Donald Trump, or wanting to see the guy up close on the roof or whatever, and he's sitting up there just sort of looking at the whole thing. And then they're like, finally, when shots ring out, they're like, oh, crap, it's actually somebody shooting this time. Obviously, if you're trained, you can't ever get complacent, or that sort of like does away the whole point of or being trained if you start getting complacent. So to me, it seems like it is a failure, though.
An absolute failure. I mean, the fact that someone was able to shoot at him from 120 yards away. I mean, it wasn't like other assassinations where someone got right up on him, pulled out a pistol, pretty much held it at their waist, and shot into his chest or something. I mean, it's not like one of those where it's like, damn, you really couldn't have done a lot because it was so close and it happened so fast. There wasn't really even time to react. This guy literally set up and everything out there in clear view. I mean, he was in clear view the entire time. The counter snipers were looking right at him. And no one did anything.
Yeah.
That is a huge security blunder.
It's a massive one. I don't even know what to say about it, to be honest with you. It's like, what do you do about that? It's like, do you just tell them, do better next time or what? Or do you have to fire them all? It's like, what's the answer?
I don't even know. But I will say this because this is something that is quite concerning. This is not a matter of just talking about this one candidate, this one person. The Secret Service is protecting him currently as a former president, and they're also protecting the current sitting president. How much danger is the current sitting president in at any given time or any given event, given the way they perform today? I mean, I would have to say that the entire abilities of the Secret Service need to be in question and investigated at this point because everyone who's under their protection currently could be at great jeopardy.
Yeah, and it looks like I'm seeing here a post on Twitter from OSINT Defender. It's the OSINT Defender believes that the FBI and the Pennsylvania State Police are, quote unquote, throwing the Secret Service under the bus for today's assassination attempt. And they're saying here that an agent or even a representative from the Secret Service are not even at the press conference. So it sounds like maybe it's sort of setting in at this point that there was a massive failure, and it sounds like the Secret Service might be sort of tucking their tail right now and sort of running. So that's kind of embarrassing because, when you start seeing like a high-level security force like that, like the Secret Service, get embarrassed like that, that's a massive blow to like the whole deterrence factor of the Secret Service being this quote unquote like really formidable force. It starts letting people know it's like, well, there are holes in it, and it might encourage people to test more holes in it. So not good.
Yeah, that is rough. I mean, that is a horrendous thing. And what's even worse is that we keep on overlooking, because of course a presidential candidate was almost killed, but someone was killed by this gunman, and another two are critically wounded in the hospital right now, from what we know, maybe fatally wounded. This has been a massive oversight and a major concern, not just for the ongoing presidential election, but for national security as a whole, with how the ball was dropped and how big of a failure the security detail ended up conducting today. This is very concerning. And I will be honest with y'all, this shakes me up a little bit because to think that it went that badly. And this is the Secret Service. These people are charged with the protection of all prior presidents and the current sitting president. And the fact that they were able to do something like that, that is very concerning. I mean, that is wildly concerning. And they didn't do anything until after the shots were fired, at all.
Yeah. And also another point as well is, the guy that did this, you have to think, for him to get to the point where he's willing to actually go out and take a shot at a former president, also a candidate, that was some serious radicalization that happened there with that. Like, you don't just like turn that way overnight or something like that. I wonder who he was in contact with, if anybody. I wonder if he's in contact with maybe people that were U.S. citizens. Maybe was he radicalized, maybe talking to people that are from foreign countries or what? What caused this 20-year-old here, if that is indeed the person that did it, to want to go out and take a shot at a candidate like that, knowing that it was going to end up costing their life? They were willing to throw their life away for this. It's like, I don't understand it. It honestly, like, I'm not trying to be mean here or anything like that, but the guy looks like one of these folks that could be manipulated pretty easily. He looks like maybe if someone took them into their confidence or something like that, he might have been able to have been talked into doing something heinous because he was desperate for attention. That's just my take on it, kind of being straight up honest and brutal there with that. And, that could be what happened, but I guess only time will tell. And also how he got his hands on that gun. That's another thing as well. Did he pass a background check to get it? Did he steal it? Did he find it on the street or what? That will be curious to know as well.
And I would have to say here's a couple of the things I think needs to be found out going forward. First and most important, to be honest, is to address why the Secret Service was so incompetent today. That's very clear. Also to address why in the world was there no communication in between the Secret Service, the state police, and the FBI that was present as well, because it seems as though from what we saw on the ground, it doesn't take an expert to see this. There was really no intercommunication amongst any of them, because the state police had no damn clue what was going on or where the guy even was, because they were running around everywhere trying to look for him, although he had already been shot and killed. The other thing we will want to find out is how in the world did he get a gun? Did he get it from his parents? Did his parents buy it and gift it to him? Did he buy it personally? How in the world did he get a gun? And 3, what propelled him and what were his motives? Because we are probably going to be finding out a good bit about what this guy was doing based off of his motives. Because who knows? I mean, we heard that he was a Chinese national. That's apparently clearly untrue. He was a local, an American citizen, most likely as well. But what if there was some international involvement in this assassination attempt? What if it was, say, a Russian-inspired assassination or a Chinese-inspired assassination, and there is a loose tie to that? What does that mean? What will that mean going forward as far as this election is concerned for both sides? Because that could start to pose a massive security issue everywhere they go, is knowing that possibly both candidates have the Chinese or the Russians trying to gun them down through hitmen like this guy. You never know. That could be something wildly concerning, but we will have to see. But that the village idiot apparently went out and tried to shoot the guy. That's all we know at this point. He clearly was a local. People knew him, so it's not really like there's some, because we have to say this because conspiracy theories pop up everywhere these days. There is no conspiracy here. It was literally a local lunatic that tried to shoot a presidential candidate. We know that for sure now. Now we just need to find out the motives and how in the world he got about to actually doing something like this. But with that, I hope that does address the additional information that we have fairly well and everything we can. It's just bizarre to see stuff like this. I'm so sorry, everyone, that we keep on getting off track and back on that, because we don't cover politics. We don't cover anything close to politics. This is the closest we ever got to covering anything political at all. But I hope y'all understand this is because it's very rare for something like this to happen. The last time anything like this happened was about 4 decades ago when Ronald Reagan got shot. We haven't seen anything happen like this anytime recently at all. So, that's something that I'd have to say it's just bizarre to see, and I'm so sorry to keep covering it and bringing it up, but it's something that is very concerning for national security and for this upcoming election, that people are starting to go to these kinds of depraved acts. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, in our next super chat here, this one is going to go to, while I try to get the spreadsheet to cooperate here, this one goes to Louis Salmaran, who put in a $50 donation. Hey! And huge shout out to Louis for that very generous support. He said, "Thank you for staying focused, and please help to keep our country strong together, and to don't allow anything to divide us." And I wish that was true, Louis. I wish that was true, because today, that's honestly what's got me a little upset, honestly, tonight, a little bit down, is to think, what's disturbed me the most is I've seen people after this came out actually cheer this on. And honestly, that blew me away. Like, I already knew it was already kind of violent in the country when it comes to politics, but to see people cheer on a fellow American to get killed over a political disagreement, that has disturbed me greatly today, very much. I wouldn't care if it was either party, either like the candidate or the current president. I would never cheer anything like this on, ever. Those are fellow Americans, and even though while I may disagree with one or the other, they don't deserve to get, eliminated for it. That's not the way this country operates. And the moment we start thinking that's okay, the country has fallen, honestly. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree with that. And I thank you so much for the support, Louis Salmarin, and thank you so much for enjoying us staying focused. And I would hope that the nation keeps strong together. But I will say it's very disheartening to see people reach such depraved extremes here in this country on both sides, because I'm sure many of y'all will know, and I've run into people out there in the world, they say, oh, And I'll say, and when I say this, I'm saying this in the place of other people, things I've heard. They'll say, "Oh, hang so and so," or "I wish this guy would get shot." You know, and I've heard that about everyone. Like, because of course, as you all know, I don't take a political position, and I also maintain that most of the time, well, pretty much all the time, in public. And I've heard people talk to me on both sides, and a lot of people are just big fans of offing the competition, or whoever they are, whether it be the current sitting president or the candidate. People just easily kind of throw that stuff out and say it like it's no big deal. And it's very concerning to me, really, to hear people throw out wishes of death on leaders of the country, former leaders of the country, candidates that could become the leaders of the country. It's very concerning to me to think that people could get to those kinds of extremes and those kinds of lows. It's almost like people forget that this country is built upon a principle that if you don't like them, there's already a built-in system to get rid of them, which is just not voting for them. And I hate to say it for folks, because this is something that I've seen over the past 2 elections. The last one for the current sitting president, and the one before that for the president who's trying to run to become the president again, is that people will try and delegitimize the election because it's not what they wanted. Like, the nation just voted another way, and they wanted a different president, and people didn't like that. So they'll say that that's not a real president, that's a fake president. I don't like seeing that kind of stuff. It degrades our democratic system. If people don't agree with you, and somehow there's more votes where one president or the other ends up getting elected, that's how it is. You just have to accept that. I mean, that's just how the democracy works. If everyone doesn't agree with you, and another president ends up getting elected rather than the one you wanted, that's just how it works. That's life. Just vote again the next 4 years and see about getting the president you want in. That's just how the world works. That's how America works. And to see people work against that now, and to wish death upon candidates that they don't like, or death upon current sitting presidents that they don't like, it's just a very sad time in the modern political discourse. It's generally why I avoid it. And also, I've seen some people bring it up, and I brought this up earlier, and it appears that I hit it dead on the nail. Many of y'all will know that we have not an affiliation, but we ended up having a lot of run-ins with someone I would call a political nut, specifically on one side, which is the hot dog man. And of course, because so many people brought it up, well, what's he saying? I was like, well, I'm gonna go, like, in one of the videos, I went and looked at that Twitter to go see what that guy was saying. And of course, it's stuff like, I don't condone violence, but you get what you pay for. It's that kind of stupid extremist stuff that is crazy. I knew that's exactly what the guy was going to say, because he's easily wanted people to kill us a million times and has tried to encourage people to do it. And of course, when we go to the FBI, to be entirely honest with you all, what we ran in the background, we tell them everything that went on. We're more than happy to provide them with evidence, clear evidence of possible threats and harm to us. The FBI doesn't do anything, just like the Secret Service hardly did anything for the presidential candidate that got shot at today. And it's just bizarre to see sick people like that out there in the world, who are in such a sick and depraved mindset that it doesn't faze them that the entire democratic process could be overdone, or that there could be an actual death of a person just because they don't agree with them and they don't want them to be the president. That is, it's bizarre. It's very bizarre. And let's see, someone said, you think so-and-so are extremists? No. I think people on both ends, once you get to the far ends of either side, they're all extreme the exact same way. And they act like the others are evil, but they're literally looking at themselves in the mirror at that point. And that's the thing that just makes me the most concerned and disheartened, is watching that kind of stuff. And that's kind of what rattles us, Matthew, me about this the most, is that it seems like people nowadays have lost just about all reasoning, all humanity when talking about this kind of stuff, and they're perfectly fine with watching people possibly get killed just because they don't agree with them. And that's just not how this country was ever supposed to work. It's not how it was designed to work. It's a democracy. It's a self-determining government. And it's a sad thing. That's the best thing I could say about it. It is a sad thing. But with that, I hope that does address that well, and I thank you so much once again for support, Louis Salmarin. Of course, many of y'all will know I'm trying to become the president of the United States, so eventually it will be inevitable that I will have to start taking a political route, and face all the new dangers that will come along with something like that. but it's something that must be done. And I feel like there has to be some kind of a voice that starts to bring things back onto a common level these days, and starts to move this country back towards an actual feasible form of governance and public discourse that just doesn't really exist in this country anymore. That's why I'm so determined on taking that route.
You know what gets me as well is I'll hear people occasionally say, how come we can't attract like new leadership, like new people to the office and stuff like that? It's like exactly for these reasons right here. It's getting so whack and so out of whack with people like taking shots at people and all kinds of other stuff. It's like, who in their right mind would want to go step into that arena with it going on like this? It's like, nobody's going to want to do that. It's like, and unfortunately, you're kind of unique because you're the only one that I'm aware of that's like, oh, I would love to go get involved in that, because it's like stepping into the pit of fire, basically, at this point, because it's gotten so nasty on every side. And it's like, we gotta lower that down if we want to keep it, civil and peaceful. Because if you don't, things like this start happening. And when things like this start happening, then the whole foundation of everything starts quaking. And then it's hard to reverse it after a while. So it's like, unless it reverses, it's not going to get any better.
Yeah, it just won't. But that's why folks have got to make decisions. Like, I want to make a decision because, so many people are like, you don't like politics, but you want to get in it. And that's kind of like, if you want to call it a dichotomy, that's kind of the dichotomy, is that I don't really personally like politics that much, but I want certain things done, so it doesn't really matter if I like it or not. I just want to get in there to be able to change things and improve things in this country. Not just on a day-to-day level for all of y'all, living your lives out there, but really just on the political level itself, and also on the national level as a whole. There's a lot of things that have to be done. And of course, I'm not going to go into them right now because we're going to stay out of politics, but there's a load of things that have to be done in this country that either both sides aren't really looking at, in my opinion, or it's just not being addressed the proper way. And that's what I want to go forward to try and fix. Of course, I will say this, though. No matter how much I would try and fix it, and if I even succeeded and it was successful, there would still be crazy people like that out there in the world. I mean, presidential assassination attempts have gone back as far back as the nation's founding itself. A lot of them have failed. Very few of them have been successful. But I would hope to try and make at least a public discourse on politics far more civil and also far more academic than we're seeing currently, because to be quite honest with y'all, I will say this: a lot of the ongoing mainstream points of political discussion are, in my personal opinion, some of the smallest priorities and some of the most inconsequential priorities that the United States is facing right now. There's so many other things that really are far higher on the priority list to me than what's usually talked about out there, but you just don't see it brought up. And that's something else I'd like to change as well. And I feel like that would really change the way of how political discourse is working in this country, is because people keep on getting brought on to very mainstream kind of inconsequential decisions. And, if I put it frankly, a lot of people would probably be very unhappy with that on every side. But the thing is that that's what makes people so violent and extremist these days, is that it's so easy on these points to try and make the other side sound like evil demons that are worth dying, because they're just that evil. And that's something that is very concerning. Anyways, I can't get too deep into it because I'm going to start getting into actual talking points there. But with that, we are on to the next one. But before we do, I want to thank you so much once again for support, Lois Salmarin. I hope we were able to address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat is another one from Joseph M. Sega, longtime channel legend, and he this time throws in a very generous $100 donation, also extremely generous support, and we appreciate it very much to Joseph M. Sega. And he says, OMG, you were like nails on a head, and are you kidding me? He said, I hated the college kids and young kids that went out shared the death of Osama Laden. And he said, and it disgusted me, he said, I was thinking, what's the next head on the snake? And he said, and these idiots were celebrating the death. Pathetic.
And I thank you for the support, Joseph M. Sika. I would personally have to say, though, with Osama bin Laden, he was a terrorist leader who ended up conducting 9/11.
He was a devil.
Yeah, it would have been nice to see him face justice in front of a court, but I think they decided that that wouldn't be possible because he was so far contained, and also he would always be armed if they tried to apprehend him, that they would pretty much have to end up killing him. So they ended up just having to shoot the guy. That one, in my honest opinion, Joseph M. Sika, that one was acceptable. because he was a terrorist leader who had ended up killing thousands of people. But as far as a democratic process goes, like here in America, is with the president being elected, trying to assassinate a presidential candidate is a pretty sick and depraved thing to do. Just let the process work its way out. I mean, if the guy gets elected, he gets elected. I mean, it is what it is. And if he doesn't get elected, it is what it is. I mean, it's just how it works. I don't know why people take it so personally, though. I really don't. Because, I mean, it is what it is, folks. I mean, no matter who wins, y'all are going to be living for the next 4 years. I mean, maybe a little bit better off, a little bit worse off, but it's not going to be anything severe. I mean, it's not to the point that you have to go shoot someone, that's what I don't really get. But with that, I do thank you for the massive amount of support, though, Joseph M. Seekin, helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And thank you once again for making this channel possible. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one goes to John B. Rempel, who puts in a $40 donation, and a huge shout out to John as well for that vid generous support. He said, "My heart goes out to the world today," he said, "and keep up the good work, gentlemen, and get one from the chat."
And thank you so much for the support, John B. Rempel. Thank you for the massive support, by the way. And thank you so much for wanting us to keep up the good work. We are trying our hardest, and we will make sure to grab one from the chat. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible. And so with that, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, and this one is going to go to, in the live chat, it's going to go to Kite. Excuse me. And Kite says, "Thoughts on Ukraine becoming nuclear again?"
Thoughts on Ukraine becoming nuclear again. As far as nuclear armed with a weapon, I'm absolutely against that. I'm not a big fan of nuclear proliferation, and I'm not a fan of nuclear arms races either. I am largely a fan of nuclear non-proliferation and also a big fan of nuclear disarmament. Or disarming, whichever way you want to say it, whichever way is proper English, which I've forgotten at this moment. But nevertheless, I would not want to see Ukraine as a nuclear-armed country. I just don't think that any country should really be armed in the modern day with nuclear weapons. Of course, it's a evil reality. Well, it's necessary evil we have to deal with in the modern way that some countries will have nuclear weapons, but I feel like that number should be as few as possible, and really relegated to the far more stable countries of the world or the major leading economic powers of the world. So to be quite honest with y'all, I'm actually not that big of a contender of taking China's nuclear weapons away. I mean, at least they're a fairly stable and major economic power, so it makes sense if there's an opposite force to the U.S. that would have nuclear weapons. China right now would actually be the only one I could think of. But countries like Russia at this point, with how unstable and how economically feeble they are, I find it to be very dangerous that they have such a large stockpile of nuclear weapons, because who knows what could happen to them. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and I thank you so much once again for sponsoring that live chat, John B. Rempel, and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Howard Turgell, who puts in a $30 donation. And thank you very much, Howard, for that support. He said, "Your coverage is second to none. Great job. And where are those F-16s?"
And thank you so much for enjoying the coverage. And thank you for saying that second to none. That's incredibly nice of you. And those F-16s are on the way. We're hearing that there's going to be 8 of them operational in the summer, about 20 of them by the end of the year, and then the remaining 62 of them at that point will eventually make it into Ukraine within the next year, hopefully, or so. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least from what we know at the moment. And thank you so much once again for the support, Howard Turgell, and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And up next, big shout out to Burbo, who put in a $30 donation. Huge shout out to Burbo for that support. And they said, "What is your opinion on the surge of Colombian ex-military volunteering for Ukraine? And the average wage in Colombia is somewhere around the 500 USD mark per month. And while Ukraine pays soldiers way above 3,000 USD per month, depending on the activities."
That is a good question, Burbo. And I would say that I'm not a big opponent of Colombian ex-military members or Colombian veterans serving in the Ukrainian Foreign Legion. That's a good way for them to make money, for one. So, you can't really turn down anyone taking advantage of a good opportunity. And two, they are fairly well trained and seasoned fighters, especially because of the operations that they have to conduct against the Contras are really the cartel at nowadays. But I would say, yeah, I mean, it's not that bad of a thing, especially for them. So I would say I'm not against it at all. In fact, I'm in support of it because not only does it provide those Colombians with a good economic opportunity, giving them a good paying job, it also provides Ukraine with some very well-seasoned and well-trained soldiers. And so with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. And thank you so much once again for support, Burbo, and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
All right, and this one is going to go to AMX10 Speedy Bang Bang, who's back once again and puts in a $20 support. And thank you very much, AMX10. And it's good to see you once again in the live chat. And he said, where is air defense? It's coming. And that's where it is. And it might be enough to defend Ukraine's cities, but is it enough to create a no-fly zone for the front line?
And thank you so much for the support, AMX10 Speedy Bang Bang. And from what we know, Ukraine is getting so many air defense systems here in the near future that they will be able to pretty much blanket the entire country, cities and front lines included, with air defense. So to answer that question, from what I know, yes, they will be able to cover the major cities, some of the moderate-sized cities, and also a good amount of the front lines as well, with major and very competent air defense systems. And so with that, thank you so much once again for supporting AMX10 Speedy Bang Bang. I hope that does address that fairly well, at least based off the current information that we have. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again.
And this one goes to the Urban Cover, who puts in a $20 donation. And a huge shout out to the Urban Cover as well. They said, hello, Chester. I love your show. I watch you every day from Kosovo, and we love the USA and F. Pootler. And hello, we are Chester.
And thank you so much for the support all the way from Kosovo. That's actually, I think, our first Kosovan viewer that we know of. And that is really cool to know, Urban Cover. And also, let's take a look at Pristana, if we can, which is the capital of Kosovo. Actually, there isn't really a lot of street view to be had, but let's drop down here. Let's see, let's let it load. This actually isn't that bad. This is really nice, actually. I like this little plaza that they have here.
Yeah, it is actually pretty nice. I'll admit, like the nice ground floor level stuff. You know, the flooring looks nice.
Yeah, the flooring does look nice. The paver, like the pavers look really nice. I think that's the real wordage for it. But let's see if we can look at another place in the town. Let's go out here. Try and look at a little bit more of a normal-ish place. This was taken in 2019. Yeah, this isn't bad at all. This is actually really nice. I would have to say really, really nice. And so, thank you so much for the support, the Urban Cover. And I got to say, thank you so much for watching the show every day. I'm not Chester, though. I'm the enforcer. My actual name is Andrew. But still, thank you so much once again for watching the show and enjoying it. Thank you for being one of our Kosovan viewers. Incredibly cool. Of course, Kosovo being supported by NATO and being inherent to Western interests as well, as we generally, as kind of a humanitarian interest, want to avoid ethnic cleansings in that region. So, of course, we back y'all up 100%. But still, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you so much for loving America, loving the Western world, and wanting to screw Poodler. Not like in the romantic way, but in the figurative way. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, by the way, I just saw on Twitter that some people are realizing they've been sharing the wrong photo of the alleged shooter today, and they're having to backtrack and delete photos of the person, which is not the person. It's actually an innocent person that has been misidentified as the shooter now. So people were roasting the hell out of the guy earlier, talking about his chin and all kinds of other stuff. So the guy, that guy's not the shooter. So hopefully that gets all cleared out, and that innocent fellow there who was not the shooter ends up getting exonerated, because apparently that's now hurt his reputation. So I'm glad we haven't shared any photos, because I was worried about that. But anyways, jumping into our next one here, we have a $20 super chat from John Garner, and a huge shout out to John for that. He says, to all of you in the chat, I may be in a flat spin, but I listen to every one of you, and thanks for listening, Bob.
And thank you so much for the support, John Garner. And I hate to hear that you're in a flat spin. I hope things are going to work out for you in the end. But beyond that, thank you so much for listening every day, and thank you for enjoying that the Leaf Spring Army is so supportive and kind, and listens to you every day as well in the live chat and gets to chat with you. Because, of course, the Leaf Spring Army is one of the nicest groups out there, some of the most civil, and I gotta say, thank you so much once again for the support, John Garner, and helping this channel to keep it running. Once again, I hope that things get better for you. Of course, life can be tough at times. It kind of comes in ups and downs. And I hope that this little down that you're having to face right now is faced with a bigger up. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well, at least from what I can say. And with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you so much once again.
And up next, huge shout out to Andy L. Andy L put in two $20 supports, separate ones that is, for a total combined $40 donation. And Andy did not leave comments on either one. But let's see here. I think Andy did leave a super sticker. And let's see here. On the last one, he said, "Thanks for being you." And the YouTube pair loves itself in the mirror. It's almost a YouTube narcissist pair. I think that might be the hot dog man. But also, the other one that was put in here, I'm trying to scroll back up to see it. It was the YouTube hippopotamus with a Borg arm and a mini nuke attached to its eyeball. And it says "up." So we got the ops up in here. But thank you very much, Andy, for that support. All seriously speaking. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta say, thank you so much for the support, Andy L, and helping this channel to keep on running. That is incredibly kind of you. And of course, the support helps us to keep this thing running, helps it to stay rolling. And thank you so much for enjoying this channel and helping it to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible. And so with that, thank you so much once again. And with that, we are about to be moving on to the next, but really quickly, I saw a question, Eddie. I'm sure you know the one I'm about to be addressing in the chat. And I got to address this one because I've been seeing this a lot on especially Twitter, and I feel like this one requires a bit dispelling, at least from what I feel would be a pretty logical or common sense kind of a position. Mike C asked, "Enforcer Man, I always watch and delay, so my question probably comes too late. But is it possible that the so-called assassination attempt was staged for sympathy votes or W-E? Because shooting 8 or 9 times, and let's see what, and just hit the ear, missing all others, simply is ridiculous." I would have to say, generally, I don't think anyone would stage a shooting where they get shot at all, even if it's on the ear, for sympathy votes, because I don't really think anyone wants to get shot at. Also, the range at which the guy was shooting, which is 120 yards, doesn't really allow for you to make that kind of fine-tuned shooting, to be entirely honest, to be able to stage just an ear clipping. And on top of that, if you watch the footage, the ear was clipped because his head moved right before the shot rang out. So if he hadn't moved his head, that shot probably would have landed center of his face, and we would be having a much different story right now than the one we're talking about. People don't stage shootings like that. I know a lot of people nowadays love to think that everything is staged and everything's pre-planned, and I'm sure everyone's saying that the Secret Service was in on wanting the presidential candidate killed because they were so inept. But the truth is that that was not planned or staged at all. That is an assassination attempt like any other. And throughout all of history, assassination attempts, just like the one that was attempted on Teddy Roosevelt, which almost went pretty much the same way that this one did, have always been conducted. They are never planned. They're never staged. They just happen because they're crazy nuts. Also, it'd be really weird if this was staged, that the specific crazy nut that they employed to conduct this knew that he was going to die. It was perfectly fine with that because he is dead. His face has been caved in by a bullet, so we know that he probably didn't expect that part. Like it's kind of like saying, you know, the war in Ukraine is staged, and everyone who's died so far, the hundreds of thousands of Russians that died, were all in on the act of it being a staged war led by some kind of a secret cabal or something like that. It just can't happen like that. Like I always say this, and I will always believe this. The real world is very easy to see. It's right in front of your eyes. Usually there's not a lot hidden. This guy was just a crazy nut from the local area that decided to try and shoot at the guy because I guess he didn't like him and he was nearby, so why not? And so he shot at the guy. He missed because he didn't really have a lot of training, and the counter snipers got him. And so it wasn't staged at all. It was just one of those crazy, freak, insane occurrences that happen out there in the world. Very rare, I will say, but certainly not staged, without a shadow of a doubt. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. I feel like that's working off of a fair position, using a good bit of common sense there. Because me personally, if I wanted sympathy votes, I wouldn't tell someone, okay, go over there about a football field away with an AR and just start wildly shooting at me, because I'd be pretty scared I might not come out of that alive. And so it wouldn't matter about the sympathy votes at that point because I'd be dead. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. But with that, we are on to the next one.
One thing's for certain, though, after the Secret Service was caught lacking a little bit, they've ramped up the security now to crazy levels. They've got people standing around all over the place, armed to the teeth, now that the candidate's moving around again. So it looks like they've stepped things up a tad now that something's happened. It's a little bit too late now, but at least they've stepped it up. But anyways, jumping into our next super chat here, we have one from Joseph M. Sika yet again, who puts in a $50 donation. Huge shout out to Joseph for that support once more. He says, "There's no room for celebration in my book for evil." He said, "All those morons cheering for a particular bad event, do you agree with them?" He said, "No, I don't think so. So don't celebrate hate of anyone," he said, "and you're just as acceptable as they are, but you can be better." And he said, "Slava Ukraine."
And thank you so much for the support, Joseph M. Sika, once again, in a pretty interesting point, because I saw you explain a lot more what you meant in the live chat after we read the super chat. And I see what you mean. You're not really into celebrating deaths of any kind, even if they are of what we would call evil people. I would say I'm not necessarily into celebrating the deaths of evil people all too much, but I will say that I'm not going to mourn them. That's one thing I will say. Because I'm not going to be mourning the death of Hitler or the death of Stalin from a stroke, or of Mao from pretty much the same thing, or from Osama bin Laden being taken out by SEAL Team 6. I mean, these were evil people. And while deaths are, of course, unfortunate, there are some deaths that are somewhat acceptable, at least as a national prerogative, especially against our enemies. And so seeing Osama bin Laden get killed, considering that he was a foreign national, of course not a United States citizen, and that he killed thousands of American citizens, his death isn't something I suppose that you could celebrate, but it is something that I wouldn't mourn either, because he was a fairly evil person who committed atrocious acts. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you so much once again for support and throwing in your opinion. It's a very interesting opinion. I definitely see where you're coming from, but I think you and me might have a little bit of a difference on that, because I don't necessarily celebrate the deaths, but I'm not going to necessarily mourn them either, if you know what I mean. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, by the way, I've seen some people saying that maybe it was the glass from a teleprompter that got him. I don't think so, because I just saw a high-definition photo of the ear, and it appears to be a hole, like going right through the ear. So that appears to be a bullet. That doesn't appear to be a piece of glass, because I think typically glass would cut you, but it wouldn't make a huge hole in the ear like that. So I think it is what it appears to be, based on what we've been told. But anyways, jump. What was that?
Well, actually, I was going to go back and review the video again really quick. So, dang, we can't see the teleprompters in that, so you know what, we won't. We'll save that, because we're also starting to run a little bit out of time. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one also goes to Joseph M. Sika, who puts in another $50 donation. A huge shout out tonight for the massive support from Joseph M. Sika. He said, "Two wrongs don't make a right, but sometimes they do. But you don't have to share about it or celebrate. That would make you as bad as they are."
And I would agree with that, Joseph MC. I thank you for the support. I think that's what I was trying to say a second ago, is that I wouldn't exactly celebrate, like go out in the streets and like party over it or anything. But I would make sure to not mourn it either, because there are some evil people out there in the world, and sometimes the only way that you can really deal with them is to conduct some fairly swift justice like that, or sometimes sanctioned violence. Of course, that's nothing for Americans to do to Americans, but sometimes the United States of America has to conduct sanctioned forms of violence against our enemies, because that sometimes is the only way to deal with them. Kind of like Nazi Germany, or the Imperial Japan, or hell, the Empire of Germany, or the United Kingdom, or really the British Empire at the time in the colonies, or the Confederacy, or anything along those lines. Sometimes sanctioned violence does have to happen. But of course, it doesn't mean that you have to celebrate it. It doesn't mean you have to mourn it either. But I do see what you're saying, though. And I thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one. But thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running.
Yes, indeed. And our next one here goes to Ben Ite. He puts in a $20 donation, and he says, "Whoa, Jack." He says, "I'm proud of the chat for not being super crazy tonight. And guys, I spent the 4th on Jordan Lake, about 10 miles from Ground Zero. Beautiful area, and long live the LSA, and keep up the keep up."
And thank you so much for the support and the kind words, Ben Knight. And I was very happy to see that the live chat wasn't crazy tonight either. Matthew and me were actually really concerned that the ban hammer was going to be flinging tonight, like really. And luckily it wasn't actually. I didn't see a lot of people getting banned, at least as much as I thought was going to get banned. It was great to see the Lee Spring Army once again shines above the rest as an actual fortress, largely very reasonable-minded, very nice folks. I love to see that, and that's what the LSA is supposed to be. And I gotta also say thank you so much once again for the support. Great to hear that you had a fun time on the 4th of July. 10 miles from Ground Zero. That's actually wildly close. And, of course, long live Lee Spring Army. And we will be keeping up the keeping up. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to DS, longtime channel legend who puts in a $20 donation. And DS says, I just love this community and our hard-working enforcers. And thank you very much for the kind words, DS. We do put in a good bit of work, and I appreciate the recognition. And Enforcer, what say you?
I got to thank you so much for the support, DS, and thank you for enjoying the amazing Lee Spring Army. They are truly an incredible bunch. And thank you for enjoying us, too. I would say we work fairly hard, but we're not hard working. I'm just kidding. We work pretty freaking hard. But still, thank you so much once again for support and the kind words as well. And thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, thank you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
And we have a $10 super chat. We have two of them, actually, from John Garner. The first one says, hi, Andy L. And how about that, Andy?
Hello, Andy.
John Garner said hi. And also, John Garner also said, show me that marmot.
Hey, well, tonight has been a rough night, honestly. We have to have a marmot, man. Like, we got to have a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel. You know what? No. I'm not going to get that one, Matthew. I'm going to get the marmot. You know what I mean?
The original?
Oh, hello, bitches.
Hello there. Would you care for a toke on the smoke?
Would you care for some hoes? Like, would you care for some? We got lots of them. But nevertheless, it's Alan the Marmot, Pippin Marmot, looking.
Also, look who else is here. It's that fly on the hot dog stand. I'm telling you what. Look at that fly. He's trying to say something. He's saying something. I heard bzz, 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 bzz. He said nothing.
Aw, man. I'm a very sad, violent person who wishes violence upon anyone I don't like. Aw, man. Death to my enemies. Aw, man. He's a great representative of what happens when your brain is on drugs. Like, no joke. That's like...
Facts.
That's a tough one there. Some of y'all are like, yeah, you know, he's kind of critical like that every night. I went over and viewed that crazy person's Twitter, and I sat there and went, wow, yeah, this guy is actually like mentally deranged. This is just this guy's normal MO. And then after he tweeted that, he will then go to another bar in Ukraine and he will drink and get drunk and then eat all day and not really do shit and then act like he's a hero. Love someone like that. We need more people like that in the world because we would have endless content with clowns like that wandering around. But beyond that, I gotta say, thank you so much once again for supporting and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you, John Garner, for wanting to see the marmot. We got the marmot and we got the pimpin' marmot. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Tom Xman, who puts in a 10 and says, sing that Putin on the Ritz song with our marmot with the top hat.
And I gotta say, Putin on the Ritz. I can't sing, like in that voice, I can't sing at all anyways, but still, thank you for the support, Tom Exton. And I hope that the marmot here is good enough. I hope that that is good enough, because singing, I think that's beyond my expertise and my abilities. But still, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running.
All right, and this one goes to Gaming and Random, who puts in a 10 and said, Matt and Enforcer, any idea what type of firearm that guy was using today? And could it be related to the unsavory people that like to do extreme thing warnings? And I think the gun that was being used, I think we're being told it's an AR.
Fairly
so
standard.
I don't have the exact model on it or anything like that. I really can't see from the photo that we have either. Let's see, let me go back to that photo and try to... Yeah, you can only see the stock on it. It appears to be an AR, though. Like, that looks like an AR stock. Can't see the optic. Can't really see the upper or the lower. All I see is the back of the buffer tube and the stock. So I couldn't say exactly what type of gun that is, except it looks like an AR. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd be damned. I'm trying to find that picture, and I'm having a hard time finding it. So let's see if I can get it. Or that video, better yet. I'd be danged. This is hard to find. So there he is on the roof. And let's see if you... Okay,
Oh, what the hell?
Sorry, that was the clips of the actual nut firing right there. I was trying to see if I could look at the firearm. I can't tell. I would assume, like Matthew said, it's probably an AR. A lot of people think that a lot of people think, that aren't really into shooting that much, that the AR is like this kind of like a monster. I'll be honest with you, I'm actually scared of other guns more than the AR. Like if I had to be scared of one. And also ARs are very common these days. You can get them cheap. I mean, what's the cheapest AR we've seen, Matthew? I think there's some out there nowadays that are like $500.
I think it's between the Colt, not the Colt, excuse me, the Smith & Wesson M&P AR, which is like, I think 700 or something like that. And I think the DPMS Panther is like 500 or something like that. So they can get pretty cheap.
Yeah,
also, Palmetto State Armory's got some pretty cheap ones too.
Yeah, you can get them pretty cheap. There's some incredibly cheap ARs out there. Really, there's some of the cheapest guns out there that you can commonly buy, because beyond that, most of them get more expensive. Like an actual real AK. I'm not talking about one of those Century Arms AKs that'll like blow up in your face. I'm talking about like a real AK. Those can run about $2,000 or $1,600 if you're really getting one of the cheaper ones. But yeah, if you're talking about what kind of firearm that fellow was using, it probably was an AR. I would put money on it because that just is the normal go-to. They're cheap. They're easy to get. For most people, it's kind of like a starter gun. So yeah, you could get one of those. I don't think it was some crazy thing like one of those little folding Keltec guns. Absolutely not. It probably was some kind of an AR. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And thank you so much once again for the support, Gaming and Random. And I hope we were able to address that somewhat well. But we will, of course, be getting more information as time goes on. I will say this, though, as far as America goes with releasing information, America is actually one of the slowest countries I've ever seen with releasing information of any kind. I don't know what it is. I don't know if cops like to feel special and like get to hold on to information for like 8 to 10 hours before they release it. I don't know what's up with that, because in other countries something will happen, they got all the information out within an hour, and then in America it'll take like 10 hours, maybe the next day, and then you'll finally get the information. So we don't know for certain. I would say it was probably an AR, though. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And thank you so much once again for support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Joseph M. Siegel once again, who puts in a 10. He says, don't let your egos get the better of you. Use your intellect.
Hey, and we will. And I thank you so much for the support, Joseph M. Siegel, and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you for throwing in your comments. It was very interesting to hear them. And so with that, thank you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have actually 4 super chats. They're each a $5 donation. The first one's from UH, who said Slava Ukraine. We also have a 5 from Alan Doherty, as well as Butchie777 and Quantum Fighter. And huge shout out to all 4 of you for that support and helping to keep the channel running. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to thank all 4 of y'all as well for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. If it wasn't for folks like y'all who enjoyed this channel enough to support it and help it to keep running, we wouldn't be able to be on here reporting the news going on each and every day. And so I have to thank y'all massively once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, and I hope I was able to address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Rad Doctor, who puts in a 5 and said, I live in Pennsylvania. He said he has many suppressors, easy to get. Now, I had to tell you what, Rad Doctor, if I've never actually had an easy experience getting suppressors at all. I only have one, but it was a long process, almost a year-long process. Rad Doctor said the wait is now only a few days, and 18-year-old to get the rifle the same day, and 21 for the handgun. And that's the same here as well, but the suppressor part, I think you've had a much different experience than me. It took me a long time to get one.
And I thank you for the support, and that's true. Actually, nowadays, you can get a suppressor really quickly, as long as you do the proper background check, tax stamp, all that stuff. But the actual wait time now is a lot shorter, because currently the ATF is under, what is it, Matt? Some kind of a congressional investigation, something like that?
I think so.
Yeah, and so they started to speed things up rapidly while that investigation is ongoing. So you can get them in days now. I actually have gotten a few. And, to be honest, after I got them, I'm like, I don't really care for suppressors that much. They gunk up the guns way too much when you shoot them. I mean, it is a hell to clean them afterwards. But Beyond that, you can get them a lot easier now than you used to back in the day. But you still have to do the tag stamp. You still have to submit your fingerprints, your picture, all that stuff. But I would say with the sound of those snaps, probably not a suppressor at all, because the suppressor doesn't really mute the sound that much of a supersonic round, but it would be a lot more noticeable than it was in that clip. And also, I do believe that you have to be, I think you have to be, no, I don't. I think you actually have to be 18 to get a tax stamp on that kind of stuff. But I'm not really sure if it's 18 or 21 on that, because the first time I ever looked into it was after I was 21, so I really didn't have to care that much about that realm of the law in that category. But with firearms, though, you are correct. You can be 18 and purchase a long arm, a rifle or a shotgun or something like that. But nowadays they actually have it by federal requirement that everyone under 21 who tries to purchase a gun gets put on a multiple month wait. I think it was about 2 to 3 months. And I know that because back when we tried to get that Tommy gun review, which really didn't go anywhere on this channel because that Tommy gun kind of sucked, I got it and I was 20. And I actually ended up having to wait about 3 months for the background check to go through, because right when I got that Tommy gun, 3 days before I went to go get it, they changed the wait period for people under 21. It went from being pretty much instantaneous like everyone to then you had to wait 3 months or so. So I know that that's changed. So it is a lot more difficult for someone under 21 to get a firearm like that. But I guess we'll find more information in the future here. But still, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well, Rad Doctor. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we now have a super chat from Gaming and Random once again. And this is I believe their second super chat of the night. And they put in a 10 this time. And huge shout out to you, Gaming and Random, for that support. It said, so if we go back to other country being in play, could this be related to the bad guy warnings that we just gotten last week? I'm just wondering.
And I thank you so much for the support. And if we go back to the other country being in play, I don't know. I don't think it would be. This does sound like a local lunatic kind of a deal, Gaming and Random. I don't think it was actually related to anyone outside of the town. I just think this was a nut who just lost his mind and went and decided to try and shoot a presidential candidate. So I don't think it was related to their warning, in my honest opinion. But I still thank you for support. Thank you for asking that question. It's a good question. I just don't think there's any relation in between the two, at least at the moment. But still, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Marc-Andre Brunette, who puts in a 5 and says, I agree with everything you both said tonight. Bravo, and long live the LSA.
And thank you so much for the support, Marc-Andre Brunette. And thank you so much for agreeing with everything we said tonight. I find that to be very nice of you, and I thank you greatly. No one has to agree with everything we say. No one has to agree with anything we say. But I hope that we were able to, on this channel, unlike many others, to speak from a position of reason and common sense and in actual sense of humanity, which many people seem to have lost these days, especially here on YouTube, from every aspect. I'm not talking about one or the other. I'm sure a lot of people take it that way. I'm talking about from every side. A lot of people have lost their humanity, and a lot of people lose the logical or common sense aspect of things, that it's wrong to want someone dead. It's wrong to want someone to shoot them. And it's wrong to go try and shoot someone, whether they're a presidential candidate or not. And so I would have to say, thank you so much once again for support. Thank you for agreeing with that. And of course, long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to, let's see here, Gaming and Random yet again. They put in their third one, and this is a $5 donation. And they just wanted to say that don't forget that we had that bad guy warning just a few days ago.
And yeah, that is true. We did have a terrorist warning a few days ago. I don't think anything came of it, and I think that was mostly for U.S. forces in Europe, if I remember correctly. But still, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Alan Doherty, who puts in a 2 and says nothing. It looks like actually it's just a $2 donation, but thank you very much, Alan, for that support. And I was about to go on a rampage saying whatever was in the super chat, but Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to thank you for the support, Alan Doherty. That threw Matthew off a great deal, because at this point he'd be like, okay, we're on to the next one. He's like, what do you say? But still, I thank you so much for support, Alan Doherty, and helping this channel to keep on running. If it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And we are on to the next one.
And Gaming and Random put in another one, another $5 donation. And thank you very much, Gaming and Random, once again. They said, much thanks to you guys in chat. and everything you've done since day one for my home country of Ukraine. LSA, LSA, LSA. And thank you. And also, they're from Ukraine, by the way. So huge shout out to Ukraine. And we do a lot of good things for Ukraine. I'm glad to see that it's appreciated by you. And most importantly, the citizens of Ukraine, because honestly, in my mind, that's what I do it the most for on my end, is I like to get involved in this and do it for the people of Ukraine. The government, they're there to serve the people. I'm not here to worship the Ukrainian government. I'm here to help out, or at least try to help out, the Ukrainian citizens, the women and children that are caught up in the war. That's what means the most to me. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to say, thank you so much for the support, Gaming and Random. We try our best to help out the Ukrainian folks over there through the fundraisers we run for the nonprofits helping out over there. Thank you so much for appreciating everything we do on this channel, not only to help out with the Sunday night fundraisers, but also just to keep everyone apprised of what's going on over there each and every day. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Mr. Shipwright, who puts in a 2 and says, sorry, correction. Enforcer Matt, my son was born on Thursday.
Hey!
And also, Mr. Shipwright, congratulations to you, by the way. I did see you say that earlier, and also huge congratulations for your son being born on Thursday, that is. And Enforcer, what say you?
And a huge congratulations to you, Mr. Shipwright. I know you got to be incredibly proud becoming a father. I hope you have an amazing time being a father. Everyone says it's always a challenge, but it's so rewarding to have a child and raise them and get to see them grow up and then have a family of their own and everything. Hopefully one day Matthew and me will be able to do that too. But beyond that, I got to congratulate you so far right now, Mr. Shipwright. Huge congratulations to you. I'm sure you're a very proud father, and I hope that you raise a very upstanding child, a model citizen of this country. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the second to last super chat of the night.
And this one goes to LSA Sergeant Figment, who puts in a 2 and says, LSA hit the like button. That's an order.
And thank you so much for the support, LSA Sergeant Figment. And of course, hit the like button, and that is an order. We got up to 2,500 likes tonight. That's an incredibly high amount of likes. But still, I got to thank you so much once again for support, LSA Sergeant Figment, encouraging people to hit that like button. And with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you so much once again for support. Also, Matthew, I saw something that Sokolov812 said about the gunman wearing a certain kind of a shirt from a certain YouTube channel. And I got to say this really quickly because I've heard that repeated a couple of times, and I think I actually saw a picture that kind of backed up that he was wearing that shirt. That is tough. I mean, like, I'll speak about that for that specific YouTuber in this whole thing. That is very bad attention to get because, you know, the guy's selling a shirt. I mean, he doesn't know who's buying the shirt, but this guy wore the shirt. And now that shirt and the brand that's on that, the channel that's on that, is going to be associated with this. I'll be honest with you. I feel kind of bad for that because that guy had no knowing of what's going on with that. So you know, I would generally tell people, yeah, that guy may have been wearing that shirt. That isn't representative of that guy's channel or his brand or anything. Because you know, I don't know that guy, you know, of course personally, but that would not be the kind of person to condone that sort of violence. That's for sure. So, you know, that's what I have to say about that. I've seen a lot of people pointing that out, and I don't know if people are trying to make something out of that or something. But, you know, that would be like, you know, because I'm trying to put ourselves in that guy's shoes, that YouTube channel's shoes. That would be like someone buying one of our shirts and then going out and conducting an atrocity. That's not representative of us at all. We didn't even really know that person, but nevertheless, they wore our shirt, and then our channel would be associated with that. And, you know, that's something that was largely out of our control, and I don't think should be taken out on that guy at all. I would make that quite clear. You know, that was just a nut wearing some kind of a shirt. Wouldn't put much more into it. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the last super chat of the night before we get on into the live chats.
And this one goes to Alan Hernandez, who puts in a 2, and it does not leave a comment. But huge shout out to Alan for helping out the channel, and we appreciate it very much. And with that, that is actually our last super chat. So once again, huge shout out to everybody tonight for supporting and donating to the channel, because we greatly appreciate it, and also love to know that y'all love our work. And sadly, we don't have the Morse code decoders tonight. I didn't see it coming in the live chat. So, Enforcer, do you have any clue what it said?
I actually, Whoa, I don't know, Jack. I forgot. But with that, we are on to the live chats now. Sadly, we didn't have any Morse code decoders, but due to time constraints, considering that the stream is about 3.5 hours long, we are going to be only addressing a limited number of live chat questions. We're going to be addressing 3, and then we're going to be rounding out tonight's stream. Also, someone said, what channel was the shirt associated with? I don't really want to say, because I don't really want to be a part of trying to like propagate the story about whose channel shirt was possibly involved. It's not good. It's not good press. I mean, the guy doesn't deserve any bad press if there was any to come from it. I mean, he didn't know that this guy was going to try and do something this crazy and this criminal and then sell him the shirt knowing that. I mean, the guy just bought a shirt. No one knew anything, none the wiser, and then the guy went and conducted a criminal act. With an insane act wearing the shirt. And so I wouldn't really want to be a part of spreading the word of whose shirt that was and propagating any kind of bad press about it, because I know that was not at all intentional on the part of that channel that sold that shirt. They didn't even know the guy for sure. And so with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
All right, and this one is going to go to David. He says, do you think the Chinese, being in Belarus, has made Lukashenko confident enough to defy Putin?
Can you reread that one again?
He said, do you think the Chinese, being in Belarus, has made Lukashenko confident enough to defy Putin?
I don't think so, because that little Chinese contingent was really small from what we know. It was like a liaison group of maybe like half a company, maybe a platoon or 2 platoons, but it wasn't a big group. So I don't think that would have given them enough confidence. So I would generally have to say probably not. And so with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Robert Jordan, who says, isn't the northern border of Ukraine with Belarus highly contaminated from the Chernobyl incident?
The northern border of Ukraine around the Chernobyl area is yes, very filled with radiation. If you actually want to see where it is, it's actually this little area right here. And let me see if they don't give a border for this. But it actually fills up a decent area of the southern region of Ukraine. This is the Polyeski State Radio-Ecological Reserve, and it actually spans across both northern Ukraine and southern Belarus within this area. It doesn't really span the entire northern Ukrainian border. There's a lot of it that's not irradiated, but this particular area, especially north of the actual nuclear power plant right here at Pripyat, all of that is irradiated. So the answer to that is yes, for the most part. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least from what I know. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so with that, who is the lucky last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Betzitel, who says, what do y'all think would happen if Putin dies, natural or otherwise? Does that mean the Ukraine war would come to an end, or what?
It really depends on who his predecessor, well, his successor actually would be. If his successor was someone like Navalny, and this is actually kind of shocking. I'm sure a lot of people will be surprised by this. If his successor ever ended up being Navalny, if he died or got removed or something, he actually would have continued on the war in Ukraine, because he actually believes that it wasn't that bad of a deal, the war in Ukraine. He was just against a lot of the corruption in the Russian Federation. If someone else took over, and I don't know who it would be, actually, some of them may end up ending the war, but I can't actually think of many that would want to end the war. They would largely be on top of, we already started this thing, let's just keep it going. A lot of them would be in that kind of a mindset, which is really disheartening, but it kind of is the reality of things, to me at least. Unless if things were going so bad and then there was a massive crisis going on when Putin died, then they would want to end the war to be popular with the people, because, you still have to be popular with the people even in a dictatorship, or at least have them in fear enough of you and not disliking you enough to do anything against you. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we have reached the end of tonight's stream. And I got to say, what a stream it was, covering historical events not only in Ukraine and in the war, but also over here in America tonight, which wasn't really planned. But I hope that y'all enjoyed that nevertheless. But of course, it was an incredible stream tonight. I got to thank you all so much once again for watching. If y'all did enjoy, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and do everything else in between that you want to, because it makes us happy when y'all do. And so with that, we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time for the Sunday night fundraiser. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And with that, thank you all once again for another great stream. Like the Enforcer said, it was a little bit out of whack because we were covering something we typically don't cover. But thank you all for bearing with us and also enjoying the coverage as well. And with that, Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava. We'll see you all tomorrow midday for the short war video if there's enough news to cover. And also, like the Enforcer said as well, for the Sunday night fundraiser stream. Once again, huge shout out to everybody who has gotten a Bot Be Gone shirt because it is now ending right as we speak. And those will be shipping out very shortly if you ordered one. So once again, we'll see you all tomorrow and get some rest and good night.
Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.